Chapter 3873. After a moment of dizziness, she was carried up by the waist. The next moment, her back was plastered on the soft bedding. The man's warm breath blew on the skin beside her ear. "You want to know if I've cheated on you, right?" When the man said this, his voice was low and hoarse, and his tone was very light. So light that it couldn't be heard, like a feather, teasing her heart. Yi Qingluo's petite body trembled uncontrollably. Her little hand clutched the man's lapel tightly. Dmo Xian propped up both hands. That peerless handsome face was reflected in the young lady's pupils. The man's eyes were filled with a clear smile. That smile made her fall into a trance, as her heart and soul sank into his pampering. Unable to extricate herself. Unwilling to extricate herself. Looking at the person below him, her eyes were like silk, with a tender and sweet look. Dmo Xian's throat tightened. Even the color of his pupils had deepened by a lot. The corners of his lips were the same. There was an evil smile on his face. It made him look even more demonic and charming than before. He opened his mouth. His deep hoarse voice was as mellow as fine wine, making one intoxicated. "I have a way to let you personally check whether I've cheated on you or not." His words fell. His kiss had already fallen. Warmth spread, gentle and affectionate. In the courtyard, only Pei Sheng and Gu Zixi were left. The two of them didn't speak to break the silence. Gu Zixi just hugged Pei Sheng, quietly accompanying him by his side. Not knowing how long had passed, Pei Sheng, who was standing stiffly on the ground, finally had a reaction. He moved. The lady beside him gently held his big palm, giving him warmth. Pei Sheng stood for a long time. His entire body was stiff. Not only his body was stiff, and his heart was stiff. After his palm was held, he stiffened his neck and turned his head. Seeing the lady beside him, his voice was bitter and slightly hoarse. "Zixi. I'm here." Gu Zixi gave him a gentle smile. Her pretty face also had a gentle smile. Only, Pei Sheng could see the tiredness between her brows, and the redness in her eyes. Pei Sheng's heart seemed to have been hit by something heavily. Subconsciously, he held Gu Zixi's small hand. There were vortexes swirling in his eyes. His emotions fluctuated greatly. Gu Zixi felt a little pain from his grip. She was slightly puzzled and called out softly, "Sheng?" Pei Sheng suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. Gu Zixi's face crashed into his chest. Pei Sheng was not gentle at all. Moreover, his face hurt a little. However, this bit of pain was nothing to Gu Zixi. An immense sense of joy enveloped her body and mind. This was Pei Sheng's first time using such a method to hold her in his arms. The man buried his head in the hollow of her neck. When he opened his mouth, there was a spurt of air. Very hot, very scorching. This was the first time they were so close to each other. The man's hoarse and pained voice rang in her ears. "Zixi, do you really not regret it?" His voice was helpless and at a loss. Word by word he spat them out. It was as if he had used up all his strength and courage. Gu Zixi buried herself in his arms and shook her head vigorously. Pei Sheng asked again, "Don't you regret your choice?" Gu Zixi still shook her head. "I'm a useless man. I'm not strong, I feel inferior, and I retreat easily. I don't even dare to choose my own life. I don't even have half of your courage." Chapter 3874. In the end, he tightened his arms a little. His voice became dignified and tense. "Do you really not regret being like this?" Pei Sheng had just finished his question. Suddenly, his neck was hooked by a soft arm. His head was slightly tilted forward. Then, his nose was filled with the fragrance of a woman. Something warm and soft covered his lips. It was a light touch. The woman had already moved back a little. Her gentle voice was like the most moving melody in the world, drifting into his ears. "I don't regret it. From the first time we met, I decided that I will be with you in this life. So no matter what kind of person you are, I will love you." She hooked her arms around his neck. Their foreheads touched each other's. Gu Zixi's pretty face was like a peach blossom. "Moreover, I know what kind of person you are better than you know yourself. What are you worried about?" This sentence was definitely not an exaggeration. Who in the world understood him the best? Gu Zixi. Pei Sheng's face turned slightly red. He tightened his grip on Gu Zixi's arms. Gu Zixi eyes lit up with a sweet smile when she saw that. She stroked his face with her little hand and said with a smile, "Don't be so unconfident. No matter what, you just have to remember that you still have me. That's enough." Zixi, Pei Sheng's eyes turned red. He suddenly pressed his big palm on Gu Zixi's head. A fierce kiss landed on her. His initiative had clearly expressed his feelings. Although both of them were in love for the first time. But in the depths of love, many things had already followed their instincts. His kiss landed. Gu Zixi leaned in his arms and panted softly. "Sheng, let's go back to the treasure trading hall. We'll come back when you've made up your mind." Gu Zixi's cheeks were red as she panted. Pei Sheng hummed in acknowledgement. Then he hugged Gu Zixi's waist tightly in his arms. Gu Zixi was so shocked that she immediately reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. However, both of them were people who had been frozen in the same position for a long time. With this force, Pei Sheng's feet felt numb after not moving for a long time. Before he could take a step, he staggered and fell to the ground with Gu Zixi in his arms. "Ah!" Gu Zixi exclaimed. Fortunately, Pei Sheng reacted quickly enough. When he felt his body stiffen, he immediately lifted Gu Zixi's body. This fall, Gu Zixi basically fell into Pei Sheng's arms. After the two of them fell to the ground, they hurriedly sat up straight. "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Both of them asked at the same time. He was still constantly checking if the other party was injured. When he heard the other party's question, both of them were taken aback. Then he saw that both of them had their hands on each other's body. Instantly, both of them laughed. In the dark, Zhou Mo, who was crouching on a tree and watching the show with Kitty Lee in his arms, looked at the two people who were giggling foolishly. He clicked his tongue and shook his head. What a pair of idiots. "I'm obviously very loving, okay?" Kitty Lee glared at him, then looked in the direction of Pei Sheng and Gu Zixi. "That is pure love. Unlike you, who has seen countless people and flirted with countless people, how would you understand this kind of love?" Hearing that, Zomo's red phoenix eyes rose. His slender fingers moved, hooked Kitty Lee's chin and turned her to him. "Little wildcat, where do you see that this young master has seen countless people?" Kitty Lee was forced to meet Zomo's eyes. When Zhou asked this question. Chapter 38-75. The cat's keen senses made Kitty Lee's black ears twitch. An invisible pressure came over. She shrunk her body and her tail started to stand up, as though he could predict Kitty Lee's next move. Just as Kitty Lee's petite figure was about to slip out of the man's embrace, Zomo's palm flipped. Once again, he locked Kitty Lee in his palm. Following that, he increased his strength as he pressed her into his embrace. His low and hoarse voice had a fox-like charm. Why aren't you replying?" This kind of charm was on Zhou, but it didn't seem out of place. On the contrary, it made Kitty Lee's ears and tail stand up. Her little black tail coiled around Zomo's wrist. The girl pretended to be fierce as her voice rang. What are you trying to do? Kitty Lee isn't afraid of you. If you dare to lay a hand on Kitty Lee, my sister loves me so much, she will definitely help me beat you up." Zomo's thin lips curled as his smile became even more charming. But the corner of his eyes revealed a sense of danger. He bent down and leaned in close to her black ears. His thin lips moved. He gently blew a breath of air on it. Kitty Lee's ears twitched as her body started to tremble. You frivolous man, you. Tell me clearly, how did I read so many people?" Zhou held on to this topic, not willing to let go. Kitty Lee's face flushed red. She was angry and also shy. Her little ears kept twitching. Her little body, which was curled up in Zomo's embrace, softened by quite a bit. Zomo's eyes deepened slightly. His gaze swept past the silly couple who were still giggling foolishly not too far away. He suddenly hooked his arm around Kitty Lee's waist and with a leap, he brought Kitty Lee and flew to another place. The wind blew mist beside her ear. The man's voice was extremely clear beside her ear at such a close distance. He said, "Little wild cat, the only woman who can move my heart is you alone. The only woman I am willing to be frivolous with is only you." The blush on Kitty Lee's face was completely unable to dissipate. The next day, there were still cultivators from various powerhouses who came to the Qiao residence as guests. On the surface, it was to visit Patriarch Qiao. But in actual fact, it was to meet Yiqing Luo, or Dmo Xian. The losses that the Earth Kingdom had suffered in this battle. All the major forces had suffered heavy losses. For a long time in the future, the major forces would be repairing the medium sun. As for Yiqing Luo's group, even without Dmo Xian's relationship, they also wanted to make friends. If he could form a good relationship with Yiqing Luo, it would definitely be of great use to his future development. Not to mention, Yiqing Luo had Dmo Xian as her backing. There was also the Red Clear Pavilion and the Underworld Palace. Now even the Huangfu family, one of the Heaven Realm's 4 great heavenly clans, had to be courteous to Yiqing Luo. From yesterday's banquet, Yiqing Luo and Old Master Huangfu's conversation could be heard. It seemed like the person whom Old Master Huangfu was looking for was Yiqing Luo's brother? The power behind this woman. It was so terrifying that it was suffocating. It could be said that the series of events that happened during the auction was the most important thing in the world. It had already made Yiqing Luo a legend in the large powerhouses' mouths. However, no matter how many profound practitioners from the major forces came, Yiqing Luo and the rest all used the excuse of recuperation to reject the visitation. Unless Patriarch Qiao personally invited him, Yiqing Luo would give him face as she led a group of people to attend. No matter what, he was Qiao Yinyan's father. No matter what, after Mo Ying's matter was settled, perhaps Qiao Yinyan would become her brother-in-law. Chapter 3876. In addition, Yiqing Luo also knew that Patriarch Qiao had been so passionate towards her from the start, which was also the reason why Qiao Yinyan took care of her. It was because of Guiyu. That's right, it was teacher Guiyu. While she and the rest were heading towards the Earth boundary, Guiyu contacted his good brother in the Earth boundary, which was Patriarch Qiao. After praising her to the heavens, Yi Zichen's eyes widened. All sorts of hints. She was definitely the type that Qiao Yinyan liked, and could definitely become his daughter-in-law. Hence, Patriarch Qiao was so naive to be fooled. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. Looking at Guiyu and Patriarch Qiao's character, now I know why the two of them became good brothers. But what made Yiqing Luo puzzled was, from yesterday till now, Qiao Yinyan was like a perverted idiot, hiding in a corner from time to time, using a resentful, painful, helpless and complicated gaze to stare at. Mo Ying. Really? None. Time. None. Engraved. And it was at any location in the Qiao residence, no repeat locations. Mo Ying didn't feel anything, because she totally didn't notice Qiao Yinyan's existence. Unless Yiqing Luo talked to her. The rest of the time, she was alone, immersed in her own thoughts, sitting there stiffly. Very obedient. Obedient, like a puppet without a soul. Empty, lifeless. But Yiqing Luo expressed that she was troubled. For example, if a person suddenly popped up from the side and stared at the person next to you with such a complicated gaze that made people's hearts tremble, it would be very difficult to imagine such a scene. Once, twice, thrice. How would you feel in your heart? Anyway, Yiqing Luo was going crazy. Several times she wanted to ask Qiao Yinyan to come over. Whatever it was, couldn't it be said clearly? Did he have to be so perverted? Was there something wrong with him? But before she could open her mouth, Qiao Yinyan was like a ghost, disappearing. Yiqing Luo. This was the first time she knew. Qiao Yinyan looked like a high mountain flower. And he had such a special hobby. He was annoyed by the various profound practitioners of the major forces who came to visit him with all kinds of excuses, such as thanking him, giving him gifts and so on. She was also flustered by Qiao Yinyan's perverted hobby. Yiqing Luo decisively pulled the group of people, preparing to head over to the Treasures Exchange Hall. Because of the auction, Dmo Xian still had things to deal with. Jun Qinggu also went to help. After all, the historian of balance was involved. This matter would definitely blow up. People of high positions like them definitely had to deal with it. Kitty Li wanted to follow. Zoemo, on the other hand, used other fun toys to kidnap Kitty Li. In the end, only Mo Ying, Gui Wu, Old Lai and a few others were left, and they all went to the Treasures Gathering Exchange House. Along the way, Old Lai had been sizing up the ghost marshal. He felt that Guiwu was very familiar. However, he could not recall where he had seen it before. He just kept staring at it. Guiwu's eyes were fixed on Old Lai, completely ignoring him. It was Yi Qingluo who couldn't stand it any longer as she patted Old Lai's arm. "Why are you staring at Master Guiwu for? If I didn't know better, I would think that you've fallen for him." Lao Lai scratched his messy hair and frowned. "I just think he looks familiar." Upon hearing those words, Guiwu slightly raised his eyebrows. He took a cold glance and retracted his gaze. "This feeling is even more familiar." Lao Lai patted his head. "But I just can't recall where I've seen him before." "Think slowly, no hurry." Yi Qingluo shot a glance at Guiwu's expressionless face. Chapter 38-77. After listening to Yi Qingluo's words, Old Lai really leaned forward and stared at Guiwu from a close distance, as though he couldn't wait to stick his eyes onto Guiwu. Fortunately, Guiwu's character was indifferent. He treated Old Lai as though he was nothing and totally ignored Old Lai's actions. If it was anyone else, to be stared at like this by Old Lai, he would probably have flown into a rage. Yi Qingluo couldn't be bothered with Old Lai as she hooked Mo Yuing, who was walking quietly behind her, and smiled. "Shadow is so obedient." Mo Yuing was hugged as her shoulder bumped into Yi Qingluo's arms. She blinked her eyes at Yi Qingluo. Yi Qingluo rubbed her furry head as she hooked her little body, and continued to walk forward with a smile. Very quickly, the four of them arrived at the Treasure Exchange Hall. Just arrived at the Treasure Exchange Hall, Yi Qingluo almost thought that she had taken the wrong way, because there were at least hundreds of people crowding around the entrance of the Treasure Exchange Hall. They were split into two teams. One team, everyone was holding various kinds of treasures in their hands. There were jade boxes, medicine bottles, big wooden boxes, weapons on their backs, etc. One team, empty-handed but with an anxious expression. There were some people who were holding crystal notes in their hands as they counted them. The common characteristic of the two teams was brocaded clothes and jade belt, fair and plump, extremely wealthy. What situation was this? This group of people came to the Treasure Exchange Hall to deposit their auction items, and to purchase trading items? When did the market in the Treasure Exchange Hall become so good? The most important thing was, at this critical juncture when the Earth realm was suffering from heavy losses, there were still so many people who had the leisure to come to the Treasure Exchange Hall. Those who are ambitious will not let go of any chance to build connections. Mo Yuing, who was hooked by her shoulder in her arms, said faintly. Yi Qingluo lowered her head and looked at the stiffened and emotionless person. She stretched out her hand and pinched her cheek. Shadow is right. These people were indeed like what Mo Yuing said. It was obvious that he was here to do business at the Treasures Exchange Hall. But in actual fact, everyone's motive was very clear. If it was in the past, the Treasure Exchange Hall was. If you wanted to pass, you would have to make a detour. Now, even if Bao Bao won the honor of the best trading house in the auction fair with the beautifying cream, that wasn't to the extent of, with so many people surrounding the treasure house, not even a drop of water could leak through. The main reason was still because Pei Sheng was a collateral descendant of the Huangfu clan, one of the four great clans in the heavenly world. Old Master Huangfu even came to welcome them personally. In everyone's eyes, Pei Sheng would definitely follow the old man to the heavenly realm. If he had befriended Pei Sheng before he left, he would have been delighted. Or perhaps, he wanted Pei Sheng to owe him a favor. Once Pei Sheng stabilized his position in the Huangfu family, this was a way out for the people of the Earth domain. Therefore, one after another, they came to the Treasures Gathering Exchange to make their presence known. From the looks of it, Pei Sheng's place was not as quiet as the Qiao Mansion. A group of people were queuing up and craning their necks. From time to time, he would raise his arm to wipe the sweat off his forehead. They were a bunch of pampered people. It was basically not their turn to do things like lining up. However, this time was different. After all, they were here to make a good impression. Naturally, they had to do it personally, so that they could show their sincerity. At the forefront, The people from both sides stuck close together as they craned their necks to look at the situation in the treasure exchange hall. Chapter 38:78. The entrance of treasure gathering hall was simply too small. The two of them stood at the entrance. There was basically no space. Just at this moment, suddenly, a hand reached over and pressed on their shoulders. With a little force, the two of them were forcibly pulled apart. The two of them who were impatient couldn't suppress the anger in their hearts. Can't you see that everyone is queuing up? Why are you cutting the queue? Get to the back of the queue. Don't break the rules. The two of them reached out to grab the hand on their shoulders. When they turned their heads, they saw an old and horrifying face. Especially the red blood stain on the eye. As if flesh and blood were surging. The two of them were so shocked that they took a few steps back. The hand that was grabbing that person also flung it away. Get out of the way. That person clapped his hands and spat out two words coldly. The two of them looked at that person's face, then their gazes fell on the few figures behind that person. They were so scared that their faces turned pale, and they immediately moved to the side. While nodding and bowing, "Please, please, please come in." The man raised his head high and swaggered into the treasure exchange hall. The few people behind him also followed in, until the few figures walked through the door. The two people in the queue, this time, wiped the sweat off their foreheads and heaved a sigh of relief. Who are those people? Why aren't they queuing? Just because he said to give way, we have to give way? The people at the back of the queue didn't see the faces of those people clearly. They only saw that those people cut the queue and were even welcomed into the treasure exchange. They who had queued for half a day had complaints in their hearts. However, just as they opened their mouths to complain, someone immediately turned his head and looked at the few people with a face full of fear. Don't shout. If they hear you, you won't even be able to enter the treasure exchange today. The few people who were complaining frowned and craned their necks to look at the entrance of the gathering treasures exchange hall. They asked suspiciously, "Who are those people who have such great power?" It could be said that there were hundreds of people queuing outside, randomly pulling one out. They were all famous people in the Earth domain. Who else could make them show such frightened expressions? Did you see that old man just now? The one who walked in first is someone from Hell Palace. Hell Palace. The person who complained immediately turned pale. The terror of the Hell Palace was that the people inside were all lunatics. It was no wonder that the two people standing at the entrance would step aside and respectfully let the old man cut the queue. If it was them, they would rather let the people from the Underworld Palace cut the queue. He didn't want to provoke trouble from Hell Palace. Not just that. Someone shook his head and clicked his tongue. What's the purpose of you lining up at the treasures exchange hall? Although everyone was well aware of it. But when asked this question, the few people who complained still shook their heads and didn't answer. That person did not pursue the matter. Instead, he said straightforwardly, "Didn't everyone come here to get to know Boss Pei of the treasures exchange? Did you see the lady in red who just went in? That young lady is Yi Qing Luo." When the three words Yi Qing Luo came out from that person's mouth, in the queue, there was a silence that lasted as long as 3 sides. Then there was an explosion. Who was Yi Qing Luo? She was a famous person now. How many people racked their brains to rush to the Qiao residence just to meet Yi Qing Luo? They had not expected that Yi Qing Luo actually came to the treasures exchange hall. No wonder those people automatically gave way. Chapter 38:79. For this treasure gathering exchange hall to have such a scene, it was all because of Yi Qing Luo. At once, the hundreds of people queuing outside were all discussing about Yi Qing Luo's legend. Their words were filled with admiration and envy towards Yi Qing Luo. No one noticed. At the corner opposite the treasure gathering exchange hall, a shadow was cast downwards. A slender figure could be seen faintly. When he heard those praises and flattery, he was stunned. Faintly, that figure clenched her fists tightly. In the darkness, that pair of eyes was like a venomous snake, shining with a sinister glint. After Yi Qing Luo and the rest stepped into the treasure gathering exchange hall, they also heard those people's discussions outside. Her brows rose as her eyes were filled with ridicule. These people kept on praising and praising her, but it was merely done in front of so many people. More than that, he just wanted to please her. After all, her age was right there. Young ladies of this age, didn't they love that bit of praise and flattery? But, in actual fact, what they were thinking in their hearts, whether they were convinced or not, that was something only they themselves knew. So those praises outside intentionally became louder and louder. Yiqing Luo totally ignored them. After she walked into the treasure gathering, she directly walked towards the direction of the counter. At the counter stood two customers. One was here to register, to take part in the next round of the treasure gathering auction. The other was here to present treasures. The commotion outside was extremely loud. The few people inside naturally heard it clearly. When Yiqing Luo walked in, those two customers had already put on a smile, as they greeted Yiqing Luo politely. Behind the counter, the two busy people immediately raised their heads and looked towards Yiqing Luo. Gu Zishi took a look at Yiqing Luo as she smiled and called out, "A Luo." She lowered her head again as she continued to record the customer's name list. Perhaps it was because yesterday, Yiqing Luo's attitude towards Pei Sheng was slightly solemn. On seeing Yiqing Luo, Pei Sheng immediately raised his head anxiously, as his eyes looked at Yiqing Luo helplessly, as he speedily left. The booklet and brush in his hands dropped onto the ground. This look seemed like a student meeting his own form teacher. Yiqing Luo. What was going on? Did she look that fierce? Sheng? Gu Zishi heard the noise beside her and immediately looked at Pei Sheng worriedly. When he saw the brush by Pei Sheng's feet, he immediately bent over to pick it up. Zishi. I'm fine. Pei Sheng sounded nervous. After that, he took a careful look at Yiqing Luo and immediately squatted down, helping her to pick up the things. The two of them picked up the items at the same time, stood up, and put them on the counter at the same time. Their hands collided. After a short pause, the two of them raised their heads at the same time and looked at each other. Soon after, a large blush spread on their faces. At the same time, the two of them quickly retracted their hands as if they had touched a flame. With a bashful look, she averted her gaze. Yiqing Luo and the rest, baffled. Were they fed another mouthful of dog food? The other three didn't have much of a reaction. It was mainly Yiqing Luo who was watching this dramatic scene. For some reason, her mind was filled with images of the pure romance of youth on campus. It seemed that the style was a little wrong. Wasn't this couple a little too silly? Chapter 3880. Sheng. Zishi. Yo-ho, that voice which was filled with obvious ridicule intentionally dragged out the last syllable. It made that pair of pure young man and woman flushed red instantly. Looking at their looks, Yiqing Luo also knew that these two had absolutely confirmed their relationship. Gu Zishi had waited for so many years. In any case, Pei Sheng understood his inner thoughts. That was not a bad growth at all. Yiqing Luo walked towards the counter. The two guests tactfully made way for him. Yiqing Luo smiled at the both of them. "Carry on with your work. We're just here to have a chat with Pei Sheng." Saying that, she waved to Old Lai. "Old Lai, I'll leave this task to you." Old Lai. She didn't mention anything about letting him be a free laborer, no matter how unwilling he was in his heart or on his face. But looking at Yiqing Luo's smiling eyes, his body still obediently walked to the side of the counter. Previously, when they stayed at the treasure gathering, Old Lai and Xiao Yinyan helped out at the treasure gathering. When they did things, they wouldn't be flustered. Old Lai replaced Pei Sheng's position, and Yiqing Luo waved her hand, asking Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi to come over to rest. Those two customers looked at Pei Sheng, who left the counter, and looked at Old Lai, who was holding the brush, with an impatient look. They were so scared that their sweat soaked their clothes. But under Old Lai's threatening gaze, they were practically trembling as they completed their own transaction. On the other side, the two of them who had been busy for the entire morning finally had some time to rest. They had just walked to the side and sat down. Pei Sheng's gaze towards Yiqing Luo was still filled with that reserved feeling. Yiqing Luo sighed. "Have you forgotten what I said to you yesterday? Between us, we are friends, partners, not some superior and subordinate. Why are you so afraid of me?" Pei Sheng's hand which was holding the teacup tightened as his eyelashes trembled unnaturally. I. His voice was slightly low. Speaking till the end, his entire head lowered. The aura from you is too strong. Yiqing Luo. Her aura was 2 meters 8? How could he be scared to this extent? It seemed that she was very cute in front of her brothers, okay? Gu Zishi couldn't help but laughed as she shook her head at Yiqing Luo. There's no need to specially correct his thinking. It's good that he's afraid of you. At least you can control him. Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes at Pei Sheng. This feeling makes it seem as though I'm very fiendish. My aura is too strong, so why isn't Zishi afraid of me? Pei Sheng glanced at Gu Zishi and blushed again. This innocent look really made Yiqing Luo have an impulse to tease her. But he thought of Pei Sheng's character. She resisted the urge. Don't be teased by her. Pei Sheng started to question himself again. He wondered if he was worthy of Gu Zishi, and then he fell into self-denial. After all, to Pei Sheng, her aura was too strong. Look at how nervous you are. Gu Zishi couldn't help but stretched out her hand as she poked Pei Sheng's shoulder, and looked towards Yiqing Luo as she asked. You came running over to gather treasures, is it to hide from those guests who had gone to Qiao residence to visit? Yiqing Luo clicked her tongue. You really dote on your Sheng. Gu Zishi's question was obviously telling Pei Sheng. She came over to gather treasures, not to ask for an answer as to whether he was going to Heaven Realm or staying in Earth Realm, but to hide from the various powerhouses cultivators. Chapter 3881. As expected, after Yiqing Luo nodded in response to Gu Zishi's words, Pei Sheng heaved a sigh of relief. He felt much more relaxed. Seeing Pei Sheng's reaction, Yiqing Luo felt more and more that she was really like a form teacher. Moreover, her aura was 2.8 meters and she could kill people with just one look. Forget it. If Pei Sheng wanted to be nervous, so be it. Anyway, he wasn't the one who was nervous. Yiqing Luo glanced at the 2 customers who were listening to their conversation with their ears pricked up. Then he looked at Pei Sheng, raised his eyebrows and reminded him. The business of treasure gathering has improved. If you want to hold an auction, are you sure you have extra time? It wasn't easy to organize an auction. In particular, only he and Gu Zishi were busy at the Treasures Exchange Hall. If he wanted to hold a successful auction, he would need at least 10 days to half a month of preparation time. However, the Huangfu clan only gave him 3 days to consider. If he chose to stay in the land, this auction was naturally not a problem. However, if he chose to return to the Heaven Realm, now that he had made so many deals, at that time, how could they still be in charge of the auction? The problem which Yiqing Luo mentioned, Pei Sheng really hadn't thought about it. Instantly, his eyes widened in astonishment as he looked at Yiqing Luo. He looked at Pei Sheng's expression. Yiqing Luo could roughly guess it. Pei Sheng was more inclined to follow old man Huangfu to the Heaven Realm from the bottom of his heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't have revealed such a shocked expression. But that's true. For Pei Sheng, who had lost all his family members after witnessing his father drown himself in the river, Pei Sheng's heart sank. His family was really his biggest weakness, even if he knew it was a tiger's den. However, he couldn't help but want to give it a try. This was human nature, and a very normal way of thinking. I actually forgot such an important thing. Gu Zishi's pretty face paled. I was too happy to see so many customers coming to the Treasures Exchange Hall. I didn't think too much about it. She immediately stood up, ran over to the counter, and brought over the list of names she had recorded. Since yesterday, I have already booked at least 400 people. What should I do? Pei Sheng stared blankly at the booklet that Gu Zishi was flipping through. A trace of pain and entanglement surfaced on his face. Could it be? This was the will of the heavens. Even the heavens felt that, should he stay in the land? Pei Sheng's thoughts were too obvious. Yiqing Luo raised her hand and pressed down the booklet that Gu Zishi was flipping through. Both of them turned to look at her. Yiqing Luo took the booklet from Gu Zishi's hand, closed it and pressed it on the table. She looked at Pei Sheng calmly with a pair of charming eyes that didn't contain a hint of a smile. That invisible pressure. Immediately, Pei Sheng became nervous again. Yi Qing Luo pressed on the booklet. Her voice was very calm and light, without much emotion. Why do you feel that it's hard to choose? This kind of thing is easy to resolve, isn't it? But it happened. She spoke in a calm tone. On the contrary, it made them feel even more pressured. That was what Pei Xing thought. His handsome face turned slightly pale. Gu Zixi, who was standing to one side, finally understood what Pei Xing meant by a powerful aura. This kind of aura, if placed on a normal person, would not be able to withstand it. Most of them would be so scared that their legs would go soft, right? Chapter 3882. Pei Xing's expression turned blank when he heard Yi Qing Luo's question. His brows creased tightly into a bundle. Towards Yi Qing Luo's question, he didn't know how to answer. His mind was in a mess. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as she continued to ask, "Since you've already booked so many customers, you need to think of a way to deal with it, isn't it?" Pei Xing slowly lowered his head, his face filled with pain and confusion. Seeing that he didn't reply, Yi Qing Luo's lips curled into a smile. Only her laughter was mixed with some ridicule. "Why not? Let me give you an idea." Although he felt that Yi Qing Luo's laughter was a little strange, and there was an inexplicable thorn in his heart. But hearing Yi Qing Luo's words, Pei Xing still swiftly raised his head and looked at Yi Qing Luo. The moment he raised his head, he met with Yi Qing Luo's eyes, which seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. That pair of deep and serene eyes were very black. It was that kind of extreme black. It was obviously that kind of seductive eyes. But it made one's heart tremble with respect and fear. Why don't you just throw away the mess that is treasure gathering, and just walk away from it? Anyway, you're someone who is going to heaven realm, so it doesn't matter how this place turns into, isn't it? These people came to treasure gathering. It's because you're a branch relative of the Huangfu family. Even if you leave with the Huangfu family, leaving this mess behind, I think these people will not blame you. After Yi Qing Luo finished her words, she propped her chin as her eyes curved as she looked at him. Between her brows, she was obviously smiling. But Pei Xing sensed an eerie chill from that smile. The two customers who were registering by the side. Could she care about them a little? They were still present. Was it really all right to tell them their purpose of coming like there was no one else around? No. No way. She almost blurted it out. Pei Xing's eyes widened as he shook his head hard. Absolutely not. Treasure Gathering Trading Hall is my father's blood and sweat. 5 years ago, my father was framed by Zhongqing Trading Hall and ruined the reputation of treasure gathering. Now, treasure gathering has finally returned to everyone's sight. I absolutely cannot let treasure gathering's reputation be tarnished. Throw away this mess and leave or something. How could he possibly do that? Yi Qing Luo smiled. This time, there was a different gentleness to her smile. She was still holding her chin. He was in the same position as before. It was just that the aura emitted from his body was slightly restrained. Since you feel that this method is not feasible, then, what are you going to do? Yi Qing Luo asked with a smile. Pei Xing fell silent again. Yi Qing Luo didn't urge him to reply at all. A moment later, in this strange atmosphere, Pei Xing moved his mouth and softly spat out a few words. I will stay in the land. Yi Qing Luo raised her brows and continued to smile. No regrets. Pei Xing wanted to say that he didn't regret it. But when the words reached his mouth, it was as if something was stuck in his throat, and he couldn't spit them out no matter what. Don't you regret it? He didn't know. He really didn't know. Yi Qing Luo laughed out loud at this moment. The hand she used to support her chin had already changed to the back of her hand to support her temples, looking very lazy. You don't answer, but you already have the answer in your heart, don't you? Yi Qing Luo's straightforwardness made Pei Xing's face turn slightly pale. He clenched his fists, opened and closed them again. Chapter 3883. Pei Xing pursed her lips tightly. It was impossible to tell what expression Zhang Xian had on his face. Yi Qing Luo shut her mouth again. She was still calm and didn't urge him to answer. He was using this 8-meter-tall aura to oppress him. After the silence of half an incense stick of time, Pei Xing seemed to have mustered up his courage. He clenched his fists so tightly that blue veins appeared on his fingertips. He plucked up his courage as he raised his head and looked at Yiqing Luo. As his voice was slightly trembling as he spoke, I'm thinking, to discuss with old Master Huang Fu, to wait till the treasures trading house's auction is held, then I'll go to Heaven Realm with him. After finishing this sentence, Pei Sheng let out a long sigh. Following that, he looked at Yiqing Luo anxiously. He was like a primary school student checking his teacher's homework. It was as if he was afraid that he had answered the question wrongly. Yiqing Luo slowly straightened her body. He was no longer as lazy as before. A pair of extremely dark and enchanting eyes stared straight into his eyes. Pei Sheng immediately tensed up. His hands subconsciously clenched his sleeves. Until, Poochie. The sound broke the increasingly heavy atmosphere. Pei Sheng looked at Yiqing Luo in a daze. She smiled? And he was smiling very brightly. It was not the kind of laughter that would make one's hair stand on end. Pei Sheng was dazed by Yiqing Luo's smile. Yiqing Luo just smiled like that, and even raised her brows while smiling as she opened her mouth. Continue speaking. Say what? Pei Sheng was dumbfounded. But seeing Yiqing Luo's smile, he subconsciously continued. I think, if we talk about it, old Master Huangfu will agree. I will try my best to convince him. I think, this is the best way to deal with it. Yiqing Luo's lips curled into a smile. Now do you feel that saying out what you want to say isn't as difficult as you imagined? Pei Sheng was startled. Yiqing Luo replied. Do you feel much better after saying it out? You don't feel that much pressure anymore? Pei Sheng's pupils constricted and reddened. His eyes were filled with gratitude. Only now did he understand. Yiqing Luo had been asking aggressively, not because she was making things difficult for him. Instead, it was guiding him. Guide him to make the choice he wanted the most in his heart. Guide him and deal with things that should be his to decide. Guide him and begin to grow. Yiqing Luo patted his shoulder lightly. Remember how you feel now. In future, don't reveal a dazed and helpless expression no matter what happens. This will give others a chance to take advantage of you, and also make Zishi worry for you. Yiqing Luo gently patted his shoulder. Don't worry about me. Pei Sheng nodded vigorously. He then looked at Gu Zishi, who was beside him, and squeezed her hand. The two looked at each other and smiled. At this moment, ha ha ha! Suddenly, a deep and steady laughter came from afar. In the next instant, a figure appeared in the hall of the treasure-gathering hall. When he saw who it was, the two guests at the side immediately felt their legs go soft, and they knelt on the ground. The people sitting around the chairs also stood up. Old Master Huangfu. The guest spoke with a trembling voice, filled with excitement and fear. Yiqing Luo took a look at the smiling Huangfu Jintian. She winked at old Lai. Lao Lai immediately dropped the brush in his hand, picked up a guest with each hand, and walked toward the door. After that, he threw the two guests out. He clapped his hands and closed the door with a paw. The hundreds of people from various powerhouses who were still queuing. What situation was this? They had queued for so long. Chapter 3884. However, no matter how the people outside talked or how they knocked on the door, the tightly shut door did not respond at all. Thinking about how Yiqing Luo and the rest had just entered. Later on, it seemed that even the big boss from the Heaven Realm had entered. Even if everyone had doubts and complaints in their hearts. Even so, he did not dare to force his way in. They could only choose. They could either leave or wait patiently in the queue. Within the treasure-gathering hall, because of Huangfu Jintian's appearance, the relaxed atmosphere from before instantly became heavy. Even Pei Sheng, compared to when he saw Yiqing Luo, was even more uneasy as he stood ramrod straight with both hands hanging by his side. The others frowned slightly and looked at him without blinking. Huangfu Jintian didn't feel that his appearance had affected anything at all. He laughed heartily as he walked towards Pei Sheng. Because of this smile, his solemn and dignified face looked a little benevolent. He looked at Pei Sheng with a gentle gaze. He walked up to Pei Sheng and patted Pei Sheng's shoulder. It was just this action. Pei Sheng was so shocked that his body tensed up. He was incomparably stiff. Even his breathing was so nervous that it was extremely slow. Huang Fuzhentian seemed as if he completely didn't notice Pei Sheng's nervousness. He didn't feel that the atmosphere in the room was very heavy. With a smile on his face, he patted Pei Sheng's shoulder and said, "Good lad, grandfather heard everything you said just now. You promised to follow grandfather back to the Huangfu clan, but grandfather took it seriously." Pei Sheng's expression became even more complicated when he called him grandfather. Coupled with Huang Fuzhentian's benevolence that was completely different from yesterday, and the intimate action of patting his shoulder, Huang Fuzhentian's expression changed. This shocked Pei Sheng to the point that he was excited and terrified. His heart was beating so fast that it felt like it was going to jump out of his throat. "Brat, your friend did the right thing. The best way to deal with this matter is to find a way to solve it yourself." Huang Fuzhentian patted Pei Sheng again before retracting his hand as he looked at Yi Qingluo with a face full of smiles. "Miss Yi, many thanks for guiding this fellow to find the right way." Yi Qingluo's lips curled. "In that case, you've agreed to Ah Sheng's condition?" A wisp of a bright light flashed past Huang Fuzhentian's dignified and wise eyes. It was gone in a flash. But it didn't escape Yi Qingluo's eyes. Subsequently, Huang Fuzhentian glanced at Pei Sheng with deep meaning and said, "That depends on how this kid convinces me." Pei Sheng tensed up again. He was slightly dazed by Huang Fuzhentian's intentionally intimate attitude. He originally thought that Huang Fuzhentian would agree readily. However, he didn't expect Huang Fuzhentian to say this. However, Yi Qingluo's smile grew even wider as she nodded in agreement. "What old Master Huang Fu said is right. I feel the same way too." The old man and the young man looked at each other and smiled. They then turned to look at Pei Sheng at the same time. Pei Sheng could only feel a tinge of coldness rising from his back amidst his anxiety and fear. Suddenly, a sharp and hurried voice sounded. "No, you can't. Grandfather, you can't agree so easily." Then Huang Fu and the other two broke into the room. Huang Fu Fengyan pounced over and hugged Huang Fuzhentian's hand, while biting her lower lip tightly. "Grandfather, Pei Sheng has Huangfu family's blood in him. Bringing him back to Huangfu family is already his grace. Grandfather has already taken a step back and allowed him to bring a useless lowly lady back to Huangfu family. He still had many requests." Chapter 3885. As Huangfu Fengyan was speaking, she shot a sinister glare towards Gu Zixi direction. But when she looked towards Huang Fuzhentian, her beautiful face was replaced with sincerity, as though every single word was for the sake of the Huangfu family. The moment the three of them appeared, they surrounded Huang Fuzhentian in the middle. Evidently, they had witnessed everything that had happened earlier. On seeing their old master and Yi Qingluo smiling at each other, as though their relationship was extremely intimate, they finally couldn't hold it in any longer. They absolutely could not let old master develop any interest towards that slut Yi Qingluo. Otherwise, if they had old master's support, wouldn't Yi Qingluo be able to do whatever she wanted? Huang Fu Fengyan was thinking furiously in her heart. Suddenly her eyes went blurry. A black shadow flashed past. Her body was locked down by an enormous force. Pa! A crisp slap resounded in the hall. Huang Fu Fengyan could only feel her ears buzzing. Her cheek was burning in pain. It made her realize what had happened. She raised her hand and covered her cheek, which was slapped. She stared fiercely at the person who made a move on her. This stare met with a young lady's scornful gaze. The young lady in front of her was dressed in a blazing red robe, peerlessly beautiful. A head of silky black hair cascaded down onto that slender shoulder. There wasn't a single piece of decoration on her. Simple yet elegant. Her entire person was filled with a lazy, undisciplined temperament. However, the young lady's lips curled into a faint smile. That unattainable peerless elegance between her brows made one feel intimidated with just one look. Huang Fu Fengyan was the same. She only raised her head to take a look. Even the question about being slapped was stuck in her throat. "Who are you talking about, lowly woman?" Yi Qingluo raised her chin as her voice was icy cold. Huang Fu Fengyan was agitated by this cold words as she shuddered, as though she suddenly woke up. Half of her swollen red face instantly emitted an intense pain. Her eyes were fuming with anger as she pointed towards Gu Zixi and Yi Qingluo in a flustered and exasperated manner. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about the both of you. Oh. Yi Qing Luo calmly replied with a word. His tone was so noble and aloof. Huang Fufengyan's heart was filled with rage, but when she heard this her face turned pale. Poochie. A chuckle could be heard. Gu Zishi covered her mouth, her eyes crinkling as she smiled. Her pretty face was full of ridicule and ridicule. Huang Fufengyan's eyes seemed to have been pierced. A conversation suddenly popped up in his mind. Lowly woman, who are you talking about? You. Wasn't she calling herself a lowly woman? Her face instantly turned red. Her usually beautiful and arrogant face now had a sinister and terrifying expression on it. Damn slut. How dare he humiliate her like this? Grandfather. Huang Fufengyan was angered to the point that her eyes turned red and tears gushed out. They are simply bullying people intolerably. Going too far? Yi Qing Luo scoffed lightly as she raised her long arm and hooked onto Gu Zishi's shoulder. Following that, her slender body seemed to be boneless as she leaned lazily on Gu Zishi. Her eyes were filled with smiles, but there wasn't a single trace of a smile in her eyes. You're just a lowly woman. What right do you have to bully my Zishi? I'm afraid you don't know that if it wasn't for Zishi, the Sheng you see now would be a corpse. Although her words were said while looking at Huang Fufengyan. Chapter 3886. Huang Fu Trio's expressions were extremely ugly. Especially Huang Fufengyan. After she heard this sentence, her eyes were bloodshot. Lowly woman? She was the dignified Huang Fu family's fourth miss. How could she be compared to a woman from the earth realm? Damn Yi Qing Luo. She was so angry that her entire body was trembling. Huang Fuqifei's gentle eyes flashed past a glint. After taking a look at Huang Fuzhentian, he took quick steps towards Huang Fufengyan, as he held onto Huang Fufengyan's shoulder with one hand, bringing her trembling body to the back of Huang Fuzhentian. Fengyan, grandfather has finally found cousin Peisheng. This is a joyous occasion, don't mess around. Huang Fuqifei's voice was very gentle, with a sense of pacification. Huang Fufengyan bit her lower lip tightly, as the blood-red color in her eyes had not dispersed, but it had quietened down. Huang Fuzhentian's white brows creased tightly. His expression was unfriendly as he looked at Huang Fufengyan unhappily, before looking at Yi Qing Luo. His tightly creased brows creased even tighter. Miss Yi. He pondered for a moment and spoke in a grave tone. Fengyan is too rash and offended you and this Miss Gu, but Fengyan is after all our Huangfu family's 4,000 gold. Will Miss Yi please consider carefully before you make a move next time? This matter was indeed Huangfu Fengyan's problem. Huang Fuzhentian couldn't very well accuse Yi Qing Luo's actions. But Huangfu Fengyan was after all his granddaughter, and a member of his Huangfu family. If she was so easily bullied by others, wouldn't that make others look down on Huangfu family? Especially when it was in the lower realm. But for Huang Fuzhentian, based on his status, indeed, he had lowered himself to a very low level. His meaning was very clear. He gave her face, and hoped that she would give Huangfu family some face on his account, and give Huangfu family some face. This matter of beating up Huangfu Fengyan would end like this. Yi Qing Luo naturally heard the meaning behind Huang Fuzhentian's words. She raised her brows as she smiled and nodded. All right, next time before I make a move, I will definitely inform you. Huang Fuzhentian. After talking for so long, you still want to fight? Yi Qing Luo shrugged her shoulders as she spread out her hands helplessly. You've seen it for yourself. It's not that I'm willing to take action, but some people are itching for a beating and insist on coming over to be beaten. Old Master also knows that for a kind-hearted person like me, how would I bear to reject someone's fervent request, right? You. How would Huangfu Fengyan not hear the sarcasm in Yi Qing Luo's words as she gritted her teeth and stared at Yi Qing Luo? He hadn't even raised his hand and pointed at Yi Qing Luo. However, he was forced back by Huang Fuzhentian's gaze. Yi Qing Luo didn't even spare Huangfu Fengyan a glance. Instead, he pushed Gu Zishi in front of the old man. Then, with a calm gaze, he looked at the old man and enunciated each word clearly. Don't think that your heaven realm is so good, or that the Huangfu family is so good. Everyone here is very clear on how difficult it is for a large family to survive. Don't say anything. Pei Sheng and Zishi have gone to the Huangfu clan. You can take care of them. When we really go to the Huangfu clan, you won't have the time to ask them. Whereas Zishi has her own power in the Earth realm, able to call the shots. Why must she give up everything and follow him to the Huangfu clan? To face all the dangers and fear, all those unknown things? Do you think she's stupid? She gave up everything in the Earth realm and followed Asheng to the Heaven realm, just because she loves Asheng. Chapter 3887. Yi Qingluo's straightforward words made Gu Zixi face turn red. She was pushed in front of Old Master Huang. Hearing Yi Qingluo praising herself in various ways, she was even more embarrassed. She didn't even dare to raise her head to look at Old Master Huang. Especially when she heard Yi Qingluo saying, to have your own force, to call the wind and summon the rain, her expression changed slightly. She had not expected. Yi Qingluo had already seen through it. But to tell the truth, her so-called force, as compared to the Huangfu family, was indeed a world of difference. She wanted to move away, but her back was blocked by Yi Qingluo's hand. Soon after, the girl's cold yet extremely clear voice drilled into one's heart. So, Zishi doesn't owe your Huangfu family anything, but Pei Sheng owes Zishi. Her brows rose as her cold voice called out Pei Sheng's name. Asheng, am I right? Pei Sheng was stunned by the 2-meter-8 aura once again, especially when he heard Yi Qingluo's words. He was even more dazed. The gaze he used to look at Gu Zixi was filled with heartache and guilt, so he hurriedly nodded his head vigorously. Even withstanding the pressure from Huangfu Zhentian, he strode to Gu Zixi side and held her hand. Zixi. Sorry. And really thank you. Willing to give up everything for him. Such a beautiful lady. He would use his entire life to repay her. Pei Sheng took the initiative to get closer and held her hand. This made Gu Zixi anxious heart instantly calm down. To her, Pei Sheng was her calming pill. As long as Pei Sheng's feelings towards her and his heart towards her no longer wavered, she had nothing to fear. Her originally apprehensive and slightly bashful blushing face was now filled with a blissful and sweet smile. Her and Pei Sheng's hands were intertwined tightly as her eyes were filled with tenderness. Yi Qingluo looked on from the side as her lips curled into a satisfied smile. To make Pei Sheng take the initiative to walk to Gu Zixi's side at this moment, to give her comfort and warmth. This was Pei Sheng's biggest improvement. As expected. As long as it was related to love, it could give a person a huge amount of courage. But the sweet atmosphere between Pei Sheng and Gu Zixi, in her or Grandpa Sheng's eyes it was sweet, but in the eyes of Huangfu and the other two, it was extremely glaring. Especially looking at the smile on Yi Qingluo's lips. Huangfu Fengyan's eyeballs were about to pop out. Anger surged in his heart. She couldn't help but sneer. Her voice was sharp because of her anger. You make it sound nice. What do you mean by your own forces? What do you mean by giving up everything? To put it bluntly, aren't you just trying to curry favor with the powerful? Using Pei Sheng to climb up the ranks of the Huangfu family? What kind of power can rival our Huangfu clan? Fengyan. Huangfu Fengyan spoke rudely once more and completely infuriated Huangfu Zhentian. Huangfu Zhentian shouted out fiercely, and the gaze he shot at Huangfu Fengyan was filled with a stern warning. Huangfu Fengyan pouted and lowered her head. Without waiting for Huangfu Zhentian to apologize to Yi Qingluo, Yi Qingluo had already burst out laughing. Between his brows, there was a lazy and elegant expression. However, the words that came out of his mouth were extremely cold. Old Master, you've seen it for yourself. It's not that I don't want to give Old Master face. But her voice sounded like she was laughing. Laughing so much that it made one's hair stand on end. Following that, her vision slowly shifted towards Huangfu Fengyan. The smile on the corners of her lips became even thicker. Chapter 3888. Huangfu Fengyan's face instantly sunk as the murderous intent in her eyes surfaced. As though she couldn't wait to rush forward and tear Yi Qingluo into pieces. Facing such a gaze, Yi Qingluo totally didn't care about it. Anyway, with Old Master Huangfu around, Huang Fufengyan had no chance to make a move. Moreover, old Lai Guiwu and the rest were around. She was afraid that Huang Fufengyan wouldn't make a move. As long as Huang Fufengyan dared to make a move, she would have the reason to. Let Huang Fufengyan die without any hesitation. Huang Fufengyan, if you dare to say another word, in future no matter what occasion you are to stay in the Huangfu family obediently and not take a step out. Huang Fuzhentian was obviously infuriated by Huang Fufengyan, as his eyes widened. Was he going to ground her? Huang Fufengyan looked at her grandfather in disbelief. But when she met her grandfather's eyes, which were filled with anger, she shuddered as she hung her head down, not daring to say another word. Yiqing Luo expressed that there was still a little bit of disappointment. If they could create a ruckus, she would be able to properly teach Huang Fufengyan a lesson. Tis. Looking at Yiqing Luo shaking her head and sighing uninterestedly. As astute as Huang Fuzhentian, how could he not see through her thoughts? Huang Fuzhentian's eyes darkened and disappeared in a blink of an eye. Very soon, his face lit up with a generous and benevolent yet dignified smile. I know that Lady Gu is a good lady. Even though I haven't spent much time with Lady Gu, I know that for you to be so unswervingly devoted to this boy when he had nothing left, you must truly be treating him with sincerity. No matter how big Miss Gu's influence in the Earth realm is, this is after all created by Miss Gu using her own hands and ability, so this is worthy of our respect. I am also very clear that Miss Gu put down everything in the Earth realm and follow this silly kid to the Heaven realm, to a foreign unknown place. How much courage did you have? I believe in Pei Sheng's foresight and choice, and I believe that I am not so old that my eyes are failing me. Huang Fuzhentian said one sentence after another, in a sincere manner. It didn't seem like it, he was just casually saying it. Gu Zixi eyes reddened as she tried to understand his words. Huang Fuzhentian smiled at Gu Zixi. Young lady, thank you so much. Gu Zixi covered her mouth. Nothing was more touching than this. She didn't care if others could understand her or misunderstand her. It was enough for her to obtain the approval of Pei Sheng's elders. Huang Fuzhentian then looked at Pei Sheng and said, Stinking brat, treat your young lady well. She is a good lady. Pei Sheng looked at Gu Zixi and intertwined their fingers. A rare look of determination appeared on the man's handsome face. I came here today just to see you, and also to deepen your impression of your grandfather. Now that I'm done, I'll take my leave first. I won't disturb you youngsters. He stepped forward and patted Pei Sheng's shoulder before patting Gu Zixi shoulder. With a smile, his figure flickered and he disappeared from the hall. Only the remnants of his majestic voice still lingered in the air. And the three of you, go back to the heavenly realm. Night. Huang Fufengyan, who was scolded by Huang Fuzhentian, was lying on the bed with half of her face still swollen. She gritted her teeth and clenched her fists, pounding the bed with force. Damn Yiqing Luo. You slut. I want you to die. She angrily pounded the bed with force. Fengyan. A slightly dissatisfied voice was heard in the wind. Chapter 3889. Hearing that person's voice, Huang Fufengyan's ferocious expression froze. She immediately looked up. She saw the man standing by the bed, staring at her with a dark expression. Huang Fufengyan immediately sat up on the bed and shifted her gaze away from the man at a loss. She nervously called out, Third brother. That's right. The person who came was the third young master of the Huangfu family, Huang Fuqifei. Huang Fuqifei stared straight at her. His usually warm eyes now contained a bit of coldness, especially after seeing her lower her head. The disdain in his eyes was even more obvious. Huang Fuqifei didn't speak for a long time. Huang Fufengyan's heart was in a mess. From time to time, she would glance at Huang Fuqifei's eyes. Facing her third brother, she had always been in awe and fear. She wasn't even this nervous in front of her brother, Huang Fudongyu. Huang Fuqifei clearly looked gentler and gentler than the others. But Huang Fufengyan was clear. Under the gentle mask of her third brother, there was a hidden cruelty. You've provoked that woman time and time again. Can't you learn to be obedient? Huang Fuqifei finally spoke. He let out a sigh. Even the sigh of a refined and elegant young master was so gentle. His knees were on the side of the bed. Huang Fufingyan's body trembled. She instinctively wanted to retreat. However, her chin was caught by the man's outstretched hand. Huang Fuqifei sat by the bed. He hooked her chin with one hand and moved closer. His face was as gentle as jade, and he was handsome and refined. There was even a hint of a smile in his eyes. Huang Fuqifei sighed lightly and said, "Look, your face is hurting, isn't it?" Huang Fufengyan felt as if a poisonous snake had slid across her face. Her pupils shrank nervously. Huang Fuqifei smiled warmly. "It's okay. You'll get used to it sooner or later. Fengyan, with the situation today, our days in the future will be more difficult than now." Huang Fufengyan was forced to meet his gaze. Looking at the gentleness in the man's eyes, she trembled. Even her lips were trembling. What habit? No. Grandfather won't. Don't you see the situation clearly? Huang Fuqifei sighed as he shook his head. Pei Sheng, that fellow now has a backer. Moreover, Yiqing Luo's performance is very obvious. She is determined to help Pei Sheng. You know very well that the power behind Yiqing Luo is not just an overlord. A wisp of a cold light flashed past the depths of Huang Fuqifei's warm eyes, and it vanished in a fleeting manner. He then looked at Huang Fufengyan. The emotions in his eyes had returned to the gentleness of a young master. After Pei Sheng returns to Huangfu family, on account of the overlord and those powerhouses behind Yiqing Luo, they will definitely give Pei Sheng a very high position. By then, how do you think Pei Sheng will treat us? He paused slightly, his fingers caressing Huang Fengyan's face, his eyes filled with heartache. My pitiful Fengyan, such a beautiful face. How could she be so ruthless? After Pei Sheng returns to the Huangfu family, what should we do? Huang Fuqifei's voice, expression, and actions. They were all heartache and helpless towards Huang Fufengyan. However, Huang Fufengyan listened to his words. She only felt her body turning icy cold. She shivered as her little hands clenched tightly onto Huang Fuqifei's sleeve, as though she was grabbing onto a life-saving straw. Chapter 3890. So, what does Fengyan want to do? Huang Fuqifei held her hand instead and patted her back lightly like a big brother, comforting her with a warm voice. I want to. Huang Fufengyan stiffly leaned into Huang Fuqifei's embrace, her eyes bursting with intense killing intent. I want him dead. Who do you want to die? Huang Fuqifei smiled warmly and slightly tightened his grip on Huang Fufengyan's hand. Pei Sheng. She would never allow anyone to affect her position in the Huangfu family. Pei Sheng was just a lowly branch disciple, a piece of trash that didn't even have half of the Huangfu family's blood in him. She would never let Pei Sheng have any chance to climb over her head. Good girl. Huang Fuqifei smiled lightly as he placed his hand on Huang Fufengyan's head, and his voice became even lower and gentler. Just do as you want to do. No matter what, third brother will always be behind you and shield you from the wind and rain. Huang Fufengyan's eyelashes trembled as she clasped her hands together. Then he hugged Huang Fuqifei tightly. Third brother. Good girl. Huang Fuqifei lightly patted her head and shoulders. His voice was still so magnetic and pleasant to listen to. However, that refined and gentle face. What emerged was a chilling ruthlessness. Especially that pair of extremely bright eyes in the dark night, flowing with treacherous cold light. Within the treasures gathering exchange house, because there were many guests on the list, Yiqing Luo and the rest also stayed behind to help tidy up the treasures. Until it was almost midnight. Yiqing Luo and the rest then prepared to leave. Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi walked them to the door. After greeting, Yiqing Luo was about to leave. Pei Sheng hesitated for a while before he quickly walked to Yiqing Luo's side and whispered, Luo, I still have something to tell you. Ever since Pei Sheng sent her out, his gaze had drifted over her body from time to time. Yiqing Luo also guessed that Pei Sheng had something to tell her. She didn't expose him because she wanted Pei Sheng to take the initiative to mention it. So Yiqing Luo wasn't surprised at all, only allowing Gui Wu and the rest to make a move first. Gui Wu and the others walked far away. Pei Sheng pouted and said softly, Today in front of old Master Huangfu, thank you. If Yiqing Luo wasn't around, the old man's arrival and the trio's arrival, It would definitely overwhelm him and Guzishi. Especially that group of three. He continued to humiliate Guzishi. If he was angered, he would only go crazy and argue with those three people. By then, old Master Shun's impression of Zishi would be even worse. I'm just speaking the truth. Yiqing Luo took a look at Guzishi's direction as her lips curled. So you should really treat Zishi well. If there's a lady who is willing to give up everything for you, then that means that she really loves you, so don't let Zishi down. I know. At the mention of Zishi, the light in Pei Sheng's eyes became brighter and more determined. I won't let her down. Yiqing Luo smiled. Pei Sheng continued, actually, I have another question. Yiqing Luo asked. Pei Sheng lowered his eyes and quickly raised them to look at her. Judging from old Master Huangfu's attitude today, he should have agreed to let me hold the auction of the treasure-gathering auction, right? After asking this question, Pei Sheng immediately lowered his head, feeling extremely apprehensive. Yiqing Luo's lips curled slightly as she asked in reply, what do you think? I think yes. Pei Sheng nodded. Chapter 3891. Pei Sheng's thoughts were exposed and his face flushed red. He indeed meant it this way. But there was no need to be so direct. Yiqing Luo laughed when she heard that. But the laughter made Pei Sheng feel a little guilty. He stiffened his body and as he raised his head, he clenched his fists and whispered, Old Master, he seems to be testing me. That feeling makes me breathless. Indeed he is testing you. Yiqing Luo raised her brows and nodded seriously. You're a grandson who is stranded outside, and he personally came to bring you back to Huangfu family. He must be bearing a huge pressure. He naturally wants to test you, whether you have the qualification to become a member of Huangfu family. Pei Sheng's face turned pale in an instant. Large-scale families are survival of the fittest. This is the norm and also the reality. Yiqing Luo was very straightforward. With your character, if you go to Huangfu family, I'm afraid you'll be in their hands. If you really want to take root in Huangfu family and protect Zishi, then you must make yourself stronger. Her expression was very calm. Even that pair of upturned eyes seemed extremely calm. Pei Sheng, on the other hand, could tell from those extremely dark eyes that the young girl was very serious. She was teaching him the way to survive in a large family clan at high speed. As for Old Master's test, what kind of results you want will depend on your own performance. Yiqing Luo still left the choice in his own hands. Pei Sheng looked at Yiqing Luo in a daze. After a long time he slowly lowered his head. I know. His voice was very soft. But she could still hear the change in his tone. Thank you, Luo. Yiqing Luo waved her hand and looked at the few of them who were so far away that they could not be seen. Think carefully on how to convince Old Master. I'll make a move first. You guys rest early too. Pei Sheng didn't urge her to stay. After the two of them said their goodbyes, Yiqing Luo chased after the few of them. After running for an entire street, she didn't see any signs of them. Yiqing Luo cursed silently. A bunch of heartless fellows. They actually didn't wait for me. Since she couldn't catch up, she might as well slow down her footsteps. Just as she was about to leave, her ears suddenly twitched sensitively. A haze immediately appeared in her long and narrow eyes. The expression on his face changed in an instant. Who are you? She looked warily at the wall in front of her. Just now he had vaguely sensed a slight fluctuation coming from there. Someone following her. Chi. An almost inaudible whooshing sound of air was extremely clear in the silent night. The moonlight shone down. It reflected the tall and imposing figure standing on the wall. The cold moonlight poured down. It made her look like a fairy from the moon, quiet and elegant like cold jade. When he saw that person, Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased as she looked at him in a daze. Zhu Wuxian? Wasn't this person before him Zhu Wuxin? Ever since the auction's array was broken, she had not seen Zhu Wuxin. Based on Zhu Wuxian's ability, Yiqing Luo wasn't worried that he had met with any accident. He didn't take it to heart. They had thought that he had returned to his faction. Unexpectedly, he was still in the Earth domain. And he was secretly following her? Indeed, Your ability has increased by more than a little. Zhu Wu Xian's icy cold voice was mixed with a few hints of ridicule. What was he ridiculing her for? Yiqing Luo rolled her eyes at him as she kept her vigilance. Don't stand so high up if you want to talk, my neck hurts. Her words had just ended. A gust of cold wind blew over. Chapter 3892. Really close. So close that the tip of his foot was pressing against hers. As long as he raised his head slightly, their breaths would collide with each other. Yiqing Luo's reaction was swift. Almost at the instant when she raised her head, she retreated 2 steps backwards, widening the distance between her and Zhu Wu Xian. Then she asked, "Why are you following me?" Zhu Wu Xian didn't move, only using that pair of black icy cold eyes to look at her quietly. His eyes were dark and heavy. Yiqing Luo couldn't tell how many emotions were hidden under that pair of eyes. He didn't speak. Yiqing Luo couldn't be bothered to ask further. She walked past Zhu Wu Xian and walked towards the direction of the Qiao residence. Taking a step, Zhu Wu Xian followed closely behind, hearing the footsteps behind her and the man's thick plum fragrance. This made Yiqing Luo unable to ignore the follower behind her. She stopped in her tracks and turned her head to look at him. "If you don't want to answer my question, then don't follow me." Zhu Wu Xian's gaze was fixed on Yiqing Luo, looking at that pair of alluring eyes which made his heart fluttered, like the stars' dazzling eyes. He went into a daze for a moment. The lines on his face became gentler, but Yiqing Luo felt a little unnatural from his weird stare. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased into a bundle as a sliver of displeasure surfaced between her brows. "Zhu Wu Xian, if there's nothing, please don't disturb me." "Yes." Zhu Wu Xian looked at her eyes as he blurted out a word. Yiqing Luo stood on the spot. "What's the matter, say it." Zhu Wu Xian's cold eyes were calm and his voice was calm without any ripples. "I miss you." Yiqing Luo. "Goodbye, goodbye." Yiqing Luo left without turning back. Zhu Wu Xian's expression congealed slightly. The lines which had finally softened suddenly turned cold and hard again. He stared at Yiqing Luo's back view. Between his brows, some black qi leaked out. Perhaps he had sensed something amiss. Yiqing Luo took 2 steps forward and swiftly turned her head around as her expression was extremely grave as she looked behind her. His gaze swept past Zhu Wu Xian, and then he quickly looked at the surroundings. The expression on his face became more and more solemn. "Zhu Wuxin, did you sense a very strange aura just now?" she asked. Zhu Wuxin's eyes flickered. His thick eyelashes hid all the emotions in his eyes, leaving only an icy chill. No. Impossible. That fleeting sense of danger just now was definitely not an illusion. Zhu Wuxin would never let her feel such a sense of danger and unease in front of her. Therefore, there must be someone hiding in the dark. In the dark? Could it be? Yiqing Luo suddenly recalled that in the afternoon, Huangfu Trio had followed Huangfu Jintian to the treasures exchange. When Huangfu Fengyan left, she looked at her with a gaze. Her heart skipped a beat. Not good. Asheng and Zishi. Something must have happened at the treasures exchange hall. Yiqing Luo. Zhu Wu Xian stood in front of Yiqing Luo. His expressionless face was indifferent. "Move aside." Yiqing Luo stretched out her hand to push Zhu Wu Xian aside. But Zhu Wuxing grabbed her wrist with the back of his hand. Yiqing Luo struggled, but he didn't loosen his grip. His calm and indifferent face brought along an oppressive aura. Yiqing Luo's slender brows creased tightly. Since she couldn't struggle free, she might as well not move. She only raised her head as her charming eyes were coated with ice, looking at Zhu Wu Xian's eyes without blinking. "Your appearance, is it a coincidence or?" Zhu Wu Xian's ability was above hers. Chapter 3893. But now, Zhu Wu Xian intentionally stopped her here. This made Yiqing Luo think more. Zhu Wu Xian's deep and icy cold eyes looked deeply at her suspicious gaze as his thin lips slowly rose, as though it was curled into an extremely shallow arc. That arc was very shallow, so shallow that Yiqing Luo could only feel his self-deprecation. "In your heart, am I such a person?" Zhu Wu Xian's voice was also very faint, with a tinge of ridicule. The hand which he held her wrist tightened. Yiqing Luo took a small step back. Facing such a piercing, questioning and hurt gaze, she really doubted herself. Did she make a mistake? After all, Zhu Wu Xian indeed didn't seem like someone who would cooperate with others to complete some plans. It was just as he had said before. He would never do anything to hurt her. But there was a strange feeling in her heart, reminding her of something. That fleeting sense of danger just now was gone. And Zhu Wu Xian's unresponsive attitude. It really made her have no choice but to think more. She exchanged glances with Zhu Wu Xian for a moment. She kept away the suspicion and probing in her eyes as she shook her wrist which was being held. All right, I believe you. But you must let go of me now. My friend might be in danger. Not letting go. Zhu Wu Xian leaned even closer. The plum fragrance from his body enveloped her. Yiqing Luo wasn't used to it and wanted to retreat, but Zhu Wu Xian held her even tighter as he pulled her towards his direction. Every time you ask me to let go, Yiqing Luo, is your heart made of iron? Yiqing Luo immediately raised her hand and blocked his chest. She raised her head as her brows creased even tighter. Zhu Wu Xian, if you continue to pester me endlessly, don't force me to really suspect you. Heh. He laughed lightly as his indifferent expression didn't fluctuate at all. His lips curled into a self-deprecating smile, as though he was ridiculing himself for being so ridiculous. Haven't you suspected me enough? Zhu Wu Xian's clear voice was calm, but Yiqing Luo could tell that he was condemning her. Yiqing Luo felt that today's Zhu Wu Xian was extremely strange. Following her for no reason. Then he stopped her for no reason. She didn't want to suspect Zhu Wu Xian. However, Zhu Wu Xian's current actions made her doubt him. Yiqing Luo's eyes darkened as a layer of frost appeared between her brows. In that case, your current motive is to not let me rush over to the treasure-gathering exchange. Zhu Wuxin's brows twitched slightly. Finally, he released Yiqing Luo's wrist. Yiqing Luo didn't even bother to take a look at him, as she speedily flew towards the direction of the treasure-gathering exchange. Just as he moved, something tightened around his waist. Zhu Wuxin's wrist circled around her waist. Yiqing Luo's expression sunk. What exactly do you want to do? I'll go with you in case you run away. Zhu Wuxin narrowed his cold eyes. His clear voice was frighteningly deep, giving off a strange feeling of danger. Yiqing Luo's fingers touched his hand which was wrapped around her waist, and with a nimble movement, she distanced herself from his approach. We can do it together, but don't get touchy. Except for Diemo. If any other man approached her, she would feel repulsed. Not to mention, clasping her wrists and hugging her waist. Yiqing Luo's feet stirred up the wind as her speed was extremely fast. Zhu Wu Xian was behind her, gazing deeply at her back view. In his black pupils, there seemed to be a whirlpool surging. This feeling was like every single time. She would turn around and leave without any hesitation. She had never turned around to give him a look. In her eyes he would never exist. He could only look at her back view forever. Chapter 3894. Zhu Wu Xian's 5 fingers tightened. In his mind, the bewitching words of that person from secluded palace kept appearing. Young Patriarch Chu, do you really think that by silently putting in the effort behind the scenes, you will be able to get the beauty back? I'll tell you directly this way. We'll never get Yiqing Luo's heart. Why do you think Yiqing Luo is so dead set on the Overlord even after she had agreed to marry you? It's because the Overlord knows how to make use of his advantage, to make Yiqing Luo slowly fall into his emotional trap. Young Patriarch Chu, you're too silly. Silly? He also felt that he was rather silly. Obviously, based on his character. If he wanted, he would plunder. If he couldn't get it, he would destroy it. But unfortunately, when facing Yiqing Luo, countless of times, his mind had already devised 100 ways to plunder Yiqing Luo. But every time he met Yiqing Luo's gaze, all of his thoughts turned into a blank. Couldn't bear to see any trace of loathing towards him in her eyes. Couldn't bear to see any trace of disappointment towards him in her eyes. Couldn't bear to let her treat him as a stranger in future. couldn't bear to even plunder. How could he bear to destroy it? Chu Wu Xian felt that he was becoming more and more unlike himself. Treasures Exchange Hall. Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi were cleaning up the Treasures Exchange Hall. Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi were cleaning up the Treasure Gathering Hall. Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi were cleaning up the Treasures Exchange Hall. Almost subconsciously, the teacup in his hand had already been thrown towards a dark corner. Almost subconsciously, the teacup in his hand had already been thrown into the darkness. Gu Zishi fell into his arms as her face blushed slightly. Gu Zishi fell into his arms, her pretty face blushing. She also felt the cold murderous air in the room. She also sensed the chilling aura that permeated the room. Just as that teacup hit the dark corner. When the teacup hit the dark corner, it was already too late. A few figures speedily dashed out. Following that, a few assassins dressed in black jumped in from all directions. Then, a few assassins dressed in black jumped in from all directions, holding weapons in their hands that emitted a chilling light. Pei Sheng tightened his grip on Gu Zishi's delicate body as he surveyed his surroundings. He then raised his eyebrows in alarm. There were at least 20 people in front of him. Each of them was tall and sturdy. Furthermore, the pressure from the Xian energy flowing through his body made it hard for him to breathe. Who are you? Why are you causing trouble at treasure gathering? This was Pei Sheng's first time encountering an assassin. His handsome face was filled with vigilance. Do it. Why would the assassin waste so much time talking to Pei Sheng? With a wave of his arm, he directed the other assassins to attack Pei Sheng. Zishi, hold on tight. Pei Sheng's face darkened, and the dark golden light in his eyes flickered even more wantonly. Immediately after, a strong burst of dark force erupted from his body. A dark golden light swirled around Pei Sheng's body. Using his hand as a blade, he slashed out a few dark golden saber lights at the assassins who were coming at him from all directions. The dark rays slashed down, and the air seemed to have been cut open. The raging hurricane was like a wave, setting off huge waves. Sheng, don't bother about me. Gu Zishi looked at the surrounding murderous assassins, as a layer of cold glint surfaced in her eyes. 20 powerful assassins whose profound grades were not low, to let Pei Sheng deal with them alone, and he still had to protect her. This was absolutely taxing. Chapter 3895. Gu Zishi's gaze swept across the assassins. His mind was already quickly analyzing the strength of these people, and the time it would take for the two of them to react. Pei Sheng did not let go. Gu Zishi knew he was worried about her. She held Pei Sheng's hand around her waist and smiled at him. Trust me, I won't let myself get hurt. The dark light intertwined. Pei Sheng saw the determination in Gu Zishi's eyes. He hesitated for a moment before letting go of her. Be careful. Gu Zishi smiled and nodded. Then, a spear appeared out of nowhere and attacked the surrounding assassins. The two of them attacked together. It did reduce the pressure on Pei Sheng. But for the two of them, the situation was not optimistic. There were too many assassins. And they were not weak. No matter how strong they were, they could not fight against so many. The two of them were at a disadvantage. Especially in terms of their physical strength, they could not compare to specially trained assassins. They resisted. After a while, they could not escape from the blades of these assassins. They could not go on like this. Pei Sheng and Gu Zishi were forced to retreat again and again. They fled into the backyard of Treasure Gathering Hall. There was no way out. At the same time, the surrounding assassins were closing in. Their attacks were very vicious. Their goal was clear. It was to take both of their lives. Killing moves were unleashed. The entire Treasure Exchange Hall shook with thunderous aftershocks. But with such a huge commotion, it did not attract the attention of the citizens. It was as if the Treasure Exchange had been isolated from without embroiling city. After forcing back a wave of attacks, the two of them were exhausted. Gu Zishi looked up at the dark, starless sky above the courtyard. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something, and her eyes flashed. She got close to Pei Sheng and stuffed something into his hands. I will attract their attention. You find a chance to throw this out of the courtyard. It was a round tube the length of a finger, carved out of bamboo. Pei Sheng didn't know what it was when he held it in his hand. After instructing Pei Sheng, Gu Zishi raised her spear. The spear had swept up a wave, and the explosive energy rushed towards the assassins. It was so fast that Pei Sheng did not have time to swap places with Gu Zishi. He saw that Gu Zishi was already fighting with the assassin. If he delayed any longer, it would only put Zishi in more danger. Pei Sheng gripped the tube tightly, leaped up, and threw the item outside the courtyard. He didn't know if it was an illusion. When the tube flew out of the courtyard, he could vaguely see a transparent wave of light blocking the tube. However, immediately after, a wisp of dark golden flowing light flickered within the transparent light wave. In the blink of an eye, the tube rushed out of the wall and landed outside the courtyard. Boom! There was a deafening explosion. A wisp of green smoke surged into the sky. The green smoke quickly filled the sky and formed a complicated pattern. Pei Sheng didn't have much time to pay attention to this strange scene. After making sure that the tube was thrown out of the hospital, some of the assassins had already sensed that something was wrong and quickly pounced towards him, wanting to stop him. Ugh! There was a muffled grunt. Gu Zishi's figure stood in front of him. The spear flipped, repelling the countless killer moves in front of it. However, the remnant might was still vibrating. Gu Zishi was hit in the chest. Zishi! Pei Sheng's pupils constricted. He quickly rushed forward and held Gu Zishi's delicate body. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of Gu Zishi's mouth. Chapter 3896. I'm fine. Gu Zishi raised her hand and wiped the blood from the corner of her lips. She shook her head at Pei Sheng and said, "Don't get distracted. Hold on a little longer. Our reinforcements will be here soon." The woman's face was clearly pale, but the corners of her mouth curved into a faint smile, pretending to be relaxed as she comforted him. Pei Sheng had an indescribable feeling in his heart. When the surrounding assassins saw this, they took the opportunity to rush forward. A murderous aura spread across the sky. However, the man who was holding the woman in his arms was stiff and motionless. It was as if he did not notice the presence of the assassins. The assassin was closing in on him at high speed. Gu Zishi's pupils dilated as she struggled to stand in front of Pei Sheng. Ah! All of a sudden, Song Pei Sheng let out a roar. The man hugged the woman and suddenly raised his head. His handsome face looked somewhat ferocious because of the roar. His eyes were covered in a layer of dark golden light. Such a radiance was extremely dazzling. It was as if all the light had gathered in his eyes. Pei Sheng roared. The surrounding assassins who were swarming over were all sent flying by the intense flowing light that burst forth from Pei Sheng's body. When Yi Qing Luo just rushed over, this was what she saw. She frowned slightly and looked at the man in front of her who was surrounded by flowing lights. The Huangfu bloodline in Pei Sheng's body was activated once again. This was not a good sign. This kind of frequent activation of the Huangfu bloodline was a little like her using a divine artifact or some other power to temporarily increase her strength. It was very easy for it to exceed the limits of her body. Suddenly, she sensed something, and her ears twitched. A group of forces is approaching. Yi Qing Luo's expression congealed slightly as she glanced sideways at Zhu Wu Xian's direction. Chu Wuxin nodded expressionlessly. She raised her head and looked at the spreading smoke in the sky. This approaching force. Was Gu Zishi using this signal flare to call for reinforcements, or were they from the killer's side? At this moment, Pei Sheng had already stopped shouting. He slightly tightened his arms around Gu Zishi and lowered his eyes. Because of Pei Sheng's roar and the aura bursting forth from his body, Gu Zishi was dumbfounded. Pei Sheng lowered his head. Her eyelashes fluttered, and when she met Pei Sheng's gaze, she froze. Pei Sheng's eyes were dark gold. It was different from the dark golden flowing light that flashed from time to time. The current him. His eyes were dark gold in color. It was a noble and majestic color. Are you scared? Pei Sheng gently bent down, kissed her forehead, and asked softly. Gu Zishi blinked her eyes and shook her head violently. No. Don't be afraid. I won't let those people hurt you again. Pei Sheng's voice was still gentle. However, the expression on his face and his dark golden eyes were filled with a chilling killing intent. He wondered if it was because of the color of her eyes. Gu Zixi felt that Pei Sheng's aura was so strong that he was 8 meters tall. Pei Sheng gently pushed Gu Zixi behind his back. His figure was tall and straight. He looked at the assassins who had been sent flying, and his dark golden eyes flashed with an extremely cold killing intent. The assassins looked at each other for a moment. Then they pounced on Pei Sheng. On the outer wall of the courtyard, 2 blazing figures were extremely eye-catching. The wind blew and Zhu Wu Xian's clothes fluttered. His eyes were calm as he looked at Yi Qing Luo. Aren't you in a hurry to save him? Why aren't you making a move? Chapter 3897. The current Pei Sheng shouldn't have any problem dealing with those killers. She made her move. She might as well let Pei Sheng nurture some experience. Let him deal with it himself. She was just going to watch the show and wait for the team that was rushing over. Which side were they from? It was indeed as what Yi Qing Luo said. The assassins who originally had the upper hand were besieging Pei Sheng, but they were actually unable to suppress Pei Sheng's arrogance. On the contrary, it made Pei Sheng braver as he fought. But it was after all 1 against 20. Under the entanglement, Pei Sheng's body was covered with scattered wounds. His robe was dyed red with blood. This made Pei Sheng even more bloodthirsty. The profound rays in his hands became sharper and sharper. Wave after wave of Xian waves exploded. The sounds of fighting were extremely loud. The originally narrow and simple backyard had turned into ruins under the entanglement. Sheng. Gu Zixi's voice was trembling as she stared at Pei Sheng with reddened eyes. Looking at the increasing number of wounds on Pei Sheng's body, she gripped her long spear tightly as she wanted to go forward to help. But she was worried that her rash actions would implicate Pei Sheng. Now Pei Sheng alone was suppressing 20 of them. If this rhythm was disrupted, Pei Sheng would be overwhelmed. She was extremely anxious as she stared anxiously at the sky outside the courtyard, which was filled with green smoke. She turned her head. She saw 2 figures standing on top of the wall. It was Yi Qing Luo. On seeing Yi Qing Luo, Gu Zixi's eyes lit up. Just as she was about to open her mouth, she saw the young lady's bright eyes curling into a smile as she shook her head. Gu Zixi was stunned as she didn't understand what was going on. Yi Qing Luo was obviously just by the side. Why didn't she help Pei Sheng? But she was very clear in her heart. Yi Qing Luo absolutely wouldn't ignore Pei Sheng. Yi Qing Luo definitely had her reasons for making such a decision. No matter how anxious Gu Zixi was, she forcefully suppressed it down. Knowing that Yi Qing Luo was just by the side, she wasn't worried anymore. She's asking you for help. Chu Wuxian naturally noticed Gu Zixi's gaze as his lips twitched coldly. Yi Qing Luo's brows rose as her eyes flashed. Why do I feel that you seem to be more anxious than me? Zhu Wuxian sneered softly and said in a self-mocking manner. Just now, in order to rush over to save these 2 people, you spoke coldly to me. Now that I've accompanied you here, you're watching the show. Do you think I can feel at ease? Your heart will also have times where it's not balanced? Yi Qing Luo slowly leaned in close to Zhu Wuxian, as her gaze looked straight at the direction of his heart. Zhu Wuxian's expression was cold, and his gaze was somewhat indifferent. I only have feelings for you, but you will only treat me as if I have no feelings for you. Yi Qing Luo opened her eyes. His gaze returned to the battlefield below. The words that came out of his mouth were directed at Zhu Wuxin. My answer is the same as before. Zhu Wuxin, it's time for you to walk out of the past. You, who are always limited by the past, will never be able to let others see your heart. I only want you to see it. Zhu Wuxin's words of love came one after another. Yi Qing Luo felt that every time she met Zhu Wuxian, Zhu Wuxin's cheesy words of love were upgraded. Every single time, it was even more seductive than the previous time. This didn't fit his image of an iceberg brother. Yi Qing Luo took a deep breath. Towards Zhu Wuxian, who was extremely obsessed, he wouldn't listen to any of her rejections. Facing Zhu Wuxian, she felt a sense of helplessness. Just at this moment, Yi Qing Luo's peripheral vision caught something. He's here. Chapter 3898. when Yi Qing Luo landed on the ground. Coincidentally, he stood in front of the group of people who were rushing over. There were about 30 people. They were all dressed in dark green clothes. The bloodstained flower pattern embroidered on it revealed their identities. Bloody Mercenary Group. The leader of the group was the most eye-catching existence. She was wearing a dark-colored dress with elegant pendants. He didn't seem like a leader at all. When Su Qingbing saw that the person blocking in front of her was Yi Qing Luo, the grave and anxious expression on her face faded a little. "Miss Yi, have you seen Zixi?" Yi Qing Luo nodded as she raised her hand and pointed towards the fading green smoke. "This is your Blood Mercenary Group's signal flare?" "Yes." Su Qingbing nodded. However, his eyes were looking around quickly. Finally, his gaze fell on the entrance of the Gathering Treasures Exchange. "Captain, I can feel the fluctuation of Xianqi coming from inside. Zixi should be inside." Deputy Regiment Commander Bo's face was filled with anxiety. When he looked at Zhu Bao, he shot forward like a cannonball. Su Qingbing didn't stop him. The signal flare was shot by Gu Zixi. If it wasn't an emergency, Gu Zixi would never use this signal flare. "Zixi is fine." Yi Qing Luo pointed to the other side of the wall. "If you're worried, you can go up and take a look." Su Qingbing furrowed her brows as a complicated expression appeared on her face. However, when they saw a red figure standing on the wall, a man emitting an extremely cold aura, their eyes unconsciously widened. "Choo choo." Su Qingbing's expression changed unpredictably when she saw the man's face. And that person's vision had always been on Yi Qing Luo. His face was cold. However, the emotions in his eyes were gentle. It was only when he sensed Su Qingbing's gaze that he raised his eyes slightly. When he looked at her, it was as if his eyes were covered with a layer of frost. When Yi Qing Luo heard Su Qingbing's unfinished words, she couldn't help but raised her slender brows. Su Qingbing actually knew Zhu Wuxin? Furthermore, just now, Zhu Wuxin's gaze had paused on Su Qingbing for more than 3 seconds. In other words, Zhu Wuxin also knew Su Qingbing. But there was no time for Yi Qing Luo to ponder over it. Bo Songyi's explosive roar could be heard from the side of the Treasures Exchange Hall. "Zixi, are you hurt?" This roar. Su Qingbing was startled awake. It also interrupted Yi Qing Luo's deep thoughts. Su Qingbing quickly walked towards the treasure gathering exchange. He had just arrived at the door. She stopped in her tracks and frowned. Then he raised his hand and touched the air with his fingers. In the blink of an eye, Yi Qing Luo saw that the direction of Su Qingbing's finger seemed to have sliced open a thin seam in the air. The transparent qi wave slowly split open to both sides, revealing a huge hole. A cold light flashed in Su Qingbing's eyes, and her slender fingers suddenly clenched tightly. That layer of air wave instantly shattered into pieces and collapsed. Within the Treasures Gathering Exchange Hall, violent and tyrannical profound energy spread out in all directions. When the 30 mercenaries from Bloody Mercenary Group who had rushed over felt this profound energy, their faces darkened, and they looked at Su Qingbing with a serious expression. Su Qingbing nodded. A group of people swarmed into the Treasures Exchange Hall. Looking at the group of aggressive mercenaries, Duan Ling Tian nodded. Yi Qing Luo slanted her head, as she couldn't be bothered to stop them. Inside, Pei-Xing should have already reached his limit. Chapter 3899. With the addition of the Blood Mercenaries Group's mercenaries, how would those killers have any ability to resist? Especially, this was the first time Gu Zixi had used the signal flare. Under Su Qingbing's anxiety, she brought along the Blood Mercenaries Group's elite mercenaries. With this move, those killers could only wait to be captured. Yi Qing Luo and Su Qingbing walked to the backyard. Bo Songyi was supporting Gu Zixi as they walked over. Group leader, Zixi is injured. Gu Zixi smiled at Su Qingbing. Group leader, I'm fine, it's just a small injury. Su Qingbing looked at Gu Zixi's pale face and frowned slightly. What's going on? Why are there killers here? She raised her eyes and glanced at Bo Songyi. Have you checked clearly? Who are these killers here to kill? Mentioning this, Bo Songyi's expression sunk. He glanced at Pei Sheng's direction from the corner of his eyes and gave a cold harumph. The trouble that lad created has caused Zishi to suffer. I'm really fine, it has nothing to do with Shang. Gu Zishi heard Bo Songyi's tone and immediately opened her mouth to explain. Bo Songyi couldn't help but sneer. He can't even protect you. What kind of man is he? Gu Zishi bit her lower lip as a sliver of anger surfaced on her face. Bo Songyi, you. Before she could finish her words, Su Qingbing interrupted. Shang? Not calling me brother anymore? Su Qingbing opened her mouth. She indeed suppressed Gu Zishi's accusation. Gu Zishi's face blushed slightly as she slowly lowered her eyelids, looking a little shy. Not brother anymore. Tease. Su Qingbing's lips curled as her elegant face broke out into a smile. Then congratulations, the clouds have parted to see the moon. Gu Zishi's face turned even redder. The two of them spoke one after another. Bo Songyi was completely stunned by the amount of information that was revealed. He looked at Gu Zishi in astonishment as his voice trembled. You and that lad. Amen. Gu Zishi smiled as she nodded. The glow in Bo Songyi's eyes dimmed, but he pretended not to mind as he said, congratulations. Coincidentally, Pei Sheng, with the help of the mercenaries, had restrained all the killers and was anxiously looking for Gu Zishi. When he saw Gu Zishi, he quickly walked over. He stretched out his long arm and pulled Gu Zishi away from Bo Songyi's side into his embrace. He placed his large palm on Gu Zishi's face and gently caressed it. Are you all right? He asked gently. Gu Zishi leaned against his chest, and her pretty face was slightly flushed. I'm fine. When their eyes met, Yi Shiwen's expression changed. It was as if there was no room for anyone else. Bo Songyi looked at his empty wrist, then raised his head and looked at Gu Zishi, who was obviously happy and sweet. His hand, which was suspended in midair, clenched into a fist. Su Qingbing walked over and gently patted his shoulder. Then he walked past Bo Songyi and walked into the courtyard. This melodramatic relationship drama made Yiqing Luo smacked her lips nonstop. However, she did not intend to intervene in this melodramatic scene. She glanced at the two of them, and after confirming that they only had some superficial injuries, she followed Su Qingbing into the courtyard. When he passed by Pei Sheng, she took out a medicine bottle and stuffed it into his hand. In the courtyard, the mercenaries stood by the side. The killers knelt on the ground, and one by one, their masks were torn off, revealing their faces. The killers had apparently been injected with profound qi, and were rooted to the ground, unable to even commit suicide. The mercenaries stood neatly by the side. The killers were pressed onto the ground in a sorry state. This stark contrast. TSK, let the Blood Red's elite mercenaries come over to wrap things up. Chapter 3900. Yiqing Luo and Su Qingbing walked over. The killer's eyes widened as they stared at the both of them with hatred, as though they were conveying their thoughts. Don't try to dig out any information from us. I will not say anything even if I die. Kill me if you have the guts. Were killers afraid of death? No. They had to commit suicide if they failed the mission. They had the determination to die when they went out on a mission. What was there to be afraid of? So other than the few killers who were killed by Pei Sheng, the remaining 10 overkillers all had a I am not afraid of anything expression. Yiqing Luo swept past the killers' faces and asked Su Qingbing sideways, these killers, which killer force are they from? You may not believe it if I say it. Su Qingbing shot a glance at the killers as her lips curled into a ridiculing arc. From their attire, these killers should be from Heaven Realm, Killer Alliance. Heaven Realm? Yiqing Luo's lips twitched. She really couldn't believe it if she said it out. This bunch of weak scum killers. Before Pei Sheng's transformation, he was already able to fight against 20 of them. Although they were at a disadvantage, but they weren't able to kill Pei Sheng. Especially the moment the mercenaries came over. They didn't even have the chance to resist, and were directly pressed onto the ground? Wasn't this too useless? Killers from Heaven Realm? So weak. Surely it wasn't a joke? No. Seeing the meaning of Yiqing Luo's expression, Su Qingbing directly responded, because I brought the elites from Blood Red. Her words paused slightly, as though she was afraid that Yiqing Luo didn't understand. She explained, These elite's abilities are well known in Heaven Realm. Yi Qing Luo sucked in a breath of cold air. They are in the Earth Realm. Doesn't that violate the balance of the realm? Won't the balance historian interfere? Generally speaking, when one's ability reached a certain level, after accepting the assessment, they would be forced to ascend to the next realm. Su Qingbing gave her a, "You are a country bumpkin" look. As long as you don't do anything that violates the balance of the realm, the historian can't do anything. Alright. If that was the explanation, then these Heaven Realm killers wouldn't be that weak. But Yi Qing Luo felt that they were still quite weak. The Assassin Alliance was the largest assassin organization in Heaven Realm. With a high status, the price would naturally be high. The customers who accepted orders were either rich or powerful. Yi Qing Luo narrowed her eyes. He already had a candidate in mind. Do you know who the mastermind is? Su Qingbing raised her eyebrows. If you know, then kill these people. Yi Qing Luo went into a blank, as her charming eyes lifted up slightly, meeting Su Qingbing's eyes. This woman seemed to be very observant. What she wants. Su Qingbing could guess it very quickly. Su Qingbing, on the other hand, was calm. After their eyes met, she even smiled at her. Yi Qing Luo hid the probing look in her eyes and replied with a smile. The killer from the Heaven Realm, the target is Pei Sheng, except Pei Sheng. Yi Qing Luo hadn't even finished her words. Suddenly, an anxious voice descended from the sky. Then a figure rushed into the courtyard. The man scanned his surroundings. After locking onto his target, his figure flashed and he dashed over. Pei Sheng was applying medicine on Gu Zixi wound. Suddenly, his shoulder was grabbed by an enormous force. His body was turned to the other side. She saw an old wrinkled face, and a pair of concerned and worried eyes. Old master. Pei Sheng was so shocked that he stuttered. Chapter 3901. Huang Fuzhentian pressed both his hands on Pei Sheng's shoulders as he sized him up. Finally, her gaze landed on the pair of eyes that were covered in dark golden flowing light. Your eyes? Huang Fuzhentian's white brows creased tightly. Are you all right? Earlier I sensed that you had once again activated the Huangfu family's energy, and I was worried about you, so I followed the feeling and rushed over. After seeing Pei Sheng's eyes, Huang Fuzhentian knew that what he had sensed earlier wasn't an illusion. When Pei Sheng heard that, his throat tightened as his eyes stared blankly at the old man in front of him. His heart tightened a little. For so many years, this was the first time he felt concern from an elder. What's the matter? Are you hurt somewhere? Huang Fuzhentian saw that he didn't speak for a long time as his white brows creased even tighter. He pulled Pei Sheng's arm and took his pulse. Pei Sheng regained his senses as he hurriedly shook his head. I'm fine. I'm fine. Luckily, Blood Mercenary Group and Luo rushed over. I'm fine. Huang Fuzhentian, who was taking Pei Sheng's pulse, frowned even tighter. This child's body was too weak. He could tell that he had absolutely suffered hardships since young. He had to recuperate properly in future. Finding out that Pei Sheng's body was weak, Huang Fuzhentian's heart doted on Pei Sheng even more. He patted Pei Sheng's shoulder as he shifted his attention to the surroundings. When he saw the rows of disheveled killers kneeling on the ground, his gaze suddenly turned sharp. What on earth is going on? Huang Fuzhentian strode towards the middle of the courtyard. The current him had a cold, hard expression as his dignified and noble aura wasn't concealed at all. Step by step he neared the killers. It suppressed the formless pressure. Yi Qing Luo had not expected that Huang Fuzhentian would actually rush over. But just from Huang Fuzhentian's reaction and performance earlier, he was indeed a qualified elder. His concern towards Pei Sheng came from the bottom of his heart. But even after Pei Sheng went to Heaven Realm, with Old Master looking after him, he would still be surrounded by danger. There were some things that she had to remind Old Master. Thinking of this, Yi Qing Luo squinted her eyes slightly as her pink lips curled up as she spoke out softly. Does Old Master Huang Fu really want to know what's going on? Someone dares to hurt my grandson. You're really not putting my Huangfu family in your eyes. Huang Fuzhentian was furious to the extreme. He raised his leg and kicked the chest of an assassin. I'll definitely get to the bottom of this matter. There's no need to investigate. Yi Qingluo's lips curled up lazily. Old master, don't be too full of yourself after all. If you were to slap his face later, it would hurt Ah Sheng's heart. Yi Qingluo's words were already very straightforward. Huang Fuzhentian naturally understood the ridicule in her words. Immediately, their faces darkened. Yi Qingluo smiled again. Originally, I wanted to trouble the brothers from Blood Red to help settle this matter. But now that Old Master Huangfu is here, I shall hand this matter over to Old Master to settle. As Yi Qingluo said that, she looked towards Su Qingbing with a smile. What does Blood Red Group leader think? These killers' assassination target is Pei Sheng. How Pei Sheng wants to deal with it, we'll deal with it. Su Qingbing cooperated. It was one thing to guess something in her heart. But hearing an outsider saying that the assassination target was Pei Sheng, this feeling was another thing. Huang Fuzhentian's expression turned even darker. Chapter 3902. Yi Qingluo was obviously passing the right to choose to him. She wanted to see if he cared more about Pei Sheng or his other grandchildren. Yes, the other grandchildren. Huangfu Trio, the killers from Heaven Realm, and their target was Pei Sheng. It was obvious who the mastermind was. Pei Sheng also understood the meaning of Yi Qingluo's words. A trace of paleness appeared on his handsome face. He pursed his lips as he looked at Huang Fuzhentian, as though he wanted to know, in Huang Fuzhentian's heart, what kind of attitude would he use to settle this matter when his grandson did something wrong? Facing the gazes of a few juniors, Zhang Xian nodded. Especially his own grandson, he was extremely careful and hid his nervous gaze. Huang Fuzhentian's white brows creased tightly as he gritted his teeth. This matter concerns the Huangfu family, I will. Before he could finish his words, Pei Sheng, who was looking at Huang Fuzhentian cautiously, suddenly interrupted him. Forget it. Forget it. Huang Fuzhentian even suspected that he was hallucinating in his ears. The rest of the people also looked at Pei Sheng in astonishment. He was almost killed. And he said forget it? Was there a hole in his brain? That was a killer from Heaven Realm. It was obvious that he wanted his life. Now he had Old Master Huangfu as his backing to settle this matter. Shouldn't he make use of this opportunity to let Old Master Huangfu cut off the mastermind's chance? So that this kind of assassination would not happen again. Pei Sheng actually let it go just like that. The mercenaries present were unable to understand Pei Sheng's actions. Bo Songyi's face was gloomy as he stared intently at Pei Sheng and Gu Zixi interlocked fingers. His heart was burning with anger. What, forget it? Isn't he afraid of death? A cowardly man. On what basis can he give Zixi happiness? He's not worthy at all. His enraged voice was definitely not soft. It also broke the shocked atmosphere because of Pei Sheng. Everyone's gazes turned towards Bo Songyi. Although Huang Fuzhentian felt more or less relieved because of Pei Sheng's forget it, Huang Fuzhentian felt a sense of relief in his heart. But when he heard Bo Songyi's rebuke and ridicule, his heart of protecting his child welled up. A pair of fierce and dignified eyes glared at Bo Songyi. Bo Songyi was forced to step back by Huang Fuzhentian's gaze. Gu Zixi also did not understand Pei Sheng's actions. She tugged at Pei Sheng's arm and looked at him in confusion before shaking her head at him. She also suggested that the best choice was to let the old man handle this matter. However, Pei Sheng smiled at her. There was a smile in his eyes. He seemed to be consoling her, telling her not to worry. Gu Zixi still wanted to say something. Yi Qingluo patted her shoulder and shook her head at her. Pei Sheng had already made up his mind. This was Pei Sheng's own decision. He had his own considerations when he chose to forget it. Gu Zixi pursed her red lips. In the end, she did not speak again. She only held the man's arm tightly with one hand and used her actions to tell him. She's always been there. The other side. Su Qingbing had already turned to the side and stood in front of Bo Songyi, blocking the old man's gaze. Huang Fuzhentian retracted his gaze and looked back at Pei Sheng as he frowned. You've been wrong today, are you sure? You don't need me to stand up for you? Pei Sheng didn't avoid his gaze this time. Instead he met the old man's gaze and nodded. I'm sure this matter. Let's forget about it. Chapter 3903. These light words were so minute that if one didn't listen carefully, it was impossible to tell what he was talking about. Because of this, Huang Fuzhentian felt his heart jolting as though it was touched by something. These words were like needles stabbing into his heart. It was so uncomfortable. This child, what kind of life had he led in the past? Was that why he was being so careful now? Not wishing for him to be put in a difficult position. Just let go of the chance to take revenge? Huang Fuzhentian was very clear what kind of people his 3 grandchildren were. Even if Pei Sheng let them off, those 3 people wouldn't be grateful. On the contrary, they would be insatiable. In a large family like the Huangfu family, Huang Fuzhentian wasn't averse to this kind of battle. But, seeing Pei Sheng, he always had a kind of guilt and heartache feeling. Huang Fuzhentian took a look at Pei Sheng as his expression was dignified as he spoke resolutely. Lad, you don't need to say any more. If I can't even protect my own grandson, then what's the point of bringing you back to the Huangfu family? I have my own plans for this matter. Pei Sheng opened his mouth and wanted to say something. But looking at Huang Fuzhentian's gaze, he still kept his mouth shut. Huang Fuzhentian patted Pei Sheng's shoulder heavily. Don't worry, no matter what, grandfather will help you to shoulder it. Pei Sheng's eyelashes moved as he looked at Huang Fuzhentian in a daze. Somewhere in his heart was being softened bit by bit. His lips moved. Grandfather. The word grandfather had yet to come out of his mouth. Suddenly he felt a gust of cold wind, bringing along a lady's fragrance. It was accompanied by a lady's anxious voice. Grandfather. Why aren't you resting in your room? Why did you come out alone? A slender figure stood in between Pei Sheng and Huang Fuzhentian. It was Huang Fufengyan. Her face was filled with anxiety as she looked at Huang Fuzhentian with an anxious expression, as though she was worried about something. At this distance, she could see the fine sweat on Huang Fufengyan's forehead. Apparently, she had sprinted over. Yi Qingluo specially swept a glance towards the direction where Huang Fufengyan came from. But she didn't discover those 2 young masters from the Huangfu family. She raised her brows, feeling a little curious. Those 2 people actually didn't follow? Huang Fufengyan actually came here alone? When he saw Huang Fufengyan, Huang Fuzhentian's face darkened. His expression was extremely ugly as he gave Huang Fufengyan a backhand slap. Huang Fufengyan was hugging onto Huang Fuzhentian's arm, and was unable to avoid it at all. Like a stone that was ejected, he flew out and fell heavily on the ground. Huang Fufengyan was stunned by the beating. He sat stiffly on the ground. Around her, there were battered and exhausted killers, staring at her with wide eyes. Huang Fufengyan's heart fell to the bottom. These assassins, all of them failed. As soon as her grandfather saw her, he gave her a slap. In other words, Grandpa already knew. Huang Fufengyan widened her eyes in horror. No, absolutely not. He couldn't ruin his image in his grandfather's heart. Huang Fufengyan couldn't be bothered about the intense pain from being slapped flying, and her eyes were red as she looked at Huang Fuzhentian pitifully. Grandfather, why did you hit Yin? I don't have a granddaughter like you. Huang Fuzhentian's expression remained unchanged. Chapter 3904. She swayed as she stood up. He purposely revealed his red and swollen face from the beating, in an attempt to arouse Huang Fuzhentian's pity. Grandfather, don't listen to other people's slanderous words. That Yi Qingluo she had previously harmed Yan in this way. Huang Fufengyan pointed at Yi Qingluo as she cried out in grievance. Yi Qingluo. Why did the blame fall onto her again? Huang Fuzhentian felt even more disappointed. But in front of so many people, he tried his best to suppress his anger. Huang Fufengyan was after all his Huangfu family's 4th Mississippi. This kind of matter, although everyone was well aware of it. But they had to close the door and settle it privately. Otherwise, the entire Huangfu family's reputation would be thrown away. Huang Fuzhentian retracted his sharp gaze, and when he looked at Pei Sheng, he became even more benevolent than before. He patted Pei Sheng lightly. Pei Sheng, I will definitely give you an explanation. Really no need. Old master, don't affect Huangfu family because of me. Pei Xing took a look at Huang Fingyan as he shook his head and rejected. The more he rejected, the more old master doted on him. The more he looked at Huang Fingyan, the more vicious his gaze became. Yi Qingluo couldn't help but clicked her tongue when she saw this scene. She crossed her arms in front of her chest as her lips twitched lazily. Following that, she pulled Gu Zishi to her side and whispered into her ear. Your Ah Sheng has improved, he actually knows how to scheme. At this point in time, no one knew Pei Xing better than Gu Zishi, so she naturally understood Pei Xing's meaning. She smiled as her eyes revealed some pride. No matter what he does, I like him. Yi Qingluo pinched her. I know you like him, there's no need to keep talking about it. I'm just curious, how did your Ah Sheng suddenly light up this skill? White lotuses were not only limited to women. When a man turned white, it was even scarier. For example, the current Pei Xing. He said forget it. Did he really think that it was over? Not possible. Not possible. How could it be over just like that? If it was according to their previous thoughts. Directly pass this assassination matter to Old Master to handle. Indeed, they could get an explanation. But in the end, the Huangfu trio would absolutely not suffer too much damage. And in the future, it might even get worse. For example, he could be even more ruthless. But Pei Xing chose to give up on revenge on purpose. She felt sorry for the old man. Not only did she put herself in the position of a victim, but she also put herself in the position of a pitiful person who was not loved or loved. In this way, how could the old man really let it go? The old master would only feel sorry for Pei Xing. They would not easily let off the mastermind behind the assassination. Even if Huangfu and the other two didn't receive any substantial punishment in the end. However, in the future, the old master would feel guilty and dote on his kind-hearted and relatable little grandson even more. Pei Xing's move. It was a beautiful move. Gu Zishi's eyes sparkled as she looked at Pei Xing. Yi Qingluo couldn't stand this simple-minded couple style as she pushed Gu Zishi to Pei Xing's side, interrupting Huangfu Fengyan's sob. Old man, it's getting late. Everyone should disperse. Ah Sheng and Zishi's wounds need to be treated as well. Mention the wound. The old man felt even more guilty. Chapter 3905. Pei Xing hesitated for a moment. He glanced at Huangfu Fengyan's direction and shook his head. There's no need. I still have to tidy up this courtyard. An assassin had broken in. And a fight. The courtyard was already in shambles. Huangfu Zhentian still wanted to say something. Yi Qingluo continued. Old master, Zishi is an alchemist. With Zishi taking care of her, you don't have to worry. After saying that, she glanced meaningfully at the assassins. The old man must have other things to deal with, right? Huangfu Zhentian's expression swiftly became extremely gloomy. His cold eyes looked at the miserable assassins on the ground, then looked at Huangfu Fengyan. He snorted coldly, his majestic anger surging. Huangfu Fengyan felt a chill run down her spine. There was only one thought in his mind. That was, he absolutely could not admit it. Once she admitted it, she would lose everything she had now. Huangfu Zhentian's gaze grew fiercer and fiercer. After staring at Huangfu Fengyan for a while, he forcefully closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, the emotions on his face were much calmer. He clasped his hands at Su Qingbing with a solemn expression. Bloody leader, thank you for your help today. I, Huangfu Zhentian, will remember your kindness. I'll definitely repay your kindness in the future. Then he said, can you let me handle these assassins? It's not really a favor. Bloody mercenary group didn't come here to save Pei Xing. Su Qingbing's lips curled into a smile. As for these assassins, if old master Huangfu wants them, feel free to take them. Not to save that brat. Huangfu Zhentian caught the main point and frowned slightly. What do you mean by that? As profound practitioners of the heaven realm, which was above the earth realm basically, he did not know much about the people or forces in the lower realms. But there were three great forces in the land, and even old master Huangfu, who was in the heaven, had heard of them. One was the gathering place of lunatics, the underworld palace. One of them was the Linglong Palace, which nurtured the saintesses of the three main cities. The other was the Bloody Mercenary Group in this world. Even if Bloody Mercenary Group was the second-ranked mercenary group, his reputation rose like a crane. This was because the number one mercenary group had already developed to the Heaven Realm, and this Bloody Mercenary Group was also known as the second mercenary group to develop their forces into Heaven Realm. Huang Fuzhentian's attitude towards Su Qingbing was so gentle. Aside from the fact that Bloody had saved Pei Sheng, he was also impressed by the Bloody Mercenary's abilities. Su Qingbing raised her slender eyebrows as a playful smile appeared on her beautiful face. She walked towards Pei Sheng. No, to be more precise, it was Gu Zishi who was walking towards Pei Sheng. He then raised his hand and placed it lazily on Gu Zishi's shoulder. As he raised his head, the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. There was an indescribable meaning in his smile. I brought my Bloody Red's elite troops here to save my troublesome vice regiment commander. Saving Pei Sheng was just a convenience. So, old Master Huangfu, you really don't have to take it to heart. Vice leader Gu Zishi. This news caused Huang Fuzhentian to be stunned. The one who had the most exaggerated reaction was Huang Fengyan. She almost bounced up from the ground and glared at Gu Zishi. Her voice was trembling. Her Vice Regiment Commander? Are you kidding me? Su Qingbing tilted her head and glanced sideways at Huang Fengyan. Chapter 3906. No. I don't believe. Huang Fengyan's eyes widened in disbelief as her body staggered. She had naturally heard of the Blood Mercenary Group's name. She also knew that it was a mercenary group which many large forces admired. Gu Zishi, that slut, was just a lowly slut who could only cling on to Pei Sheng's illegitimate son. How could she change so quickly and become the vice group leader of the Blood Mercenary Group? Vice group leader. It wasn't as simple as the Blood Mercenary Group. That was second only to the group leader. Huang Fengyan couldn't believe that the lady whom she had belittled would have such a powerful background. Huang Fengyan's sharp voice made Pei Sheng regain his senses. He also widened his eyes in shock and astonishment. He only knew that Gu Zishi and the Blood Mercenary Group had a good relationship. It was rumored that Gu Zishi had saved the Blood Mercenary Group's group leader on the West Cliff Mountain, hence the Blood Mercenary Group would occasionally help Gu Zishi or gather treasures. But he had never thought that Gu Zishi and the Blood Mercenary Group had such a deep relationship. In his mind, he suddenly recalled what Yiqing Luo said previously. Gu Zishi gave up everything in the Earth Realm and followed him to the Heaven Realm. This everything. He didn't think too deeply at that time. Until now. He finally understood. This everything was really Gu Zishi's everything. She could even give up the identity of the Blood Mercenary Group's vice group leader. Gu Zishi's feelings for him. How deep was it? Pei Sheng only felt his heart suddenly constricting, as if something was squeezing it tightly. His eyes felt a little warm and sore. He looked at Gu Zishi without blinking. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand and hugged Gu Zishi's petite body tightly in his arms. His head rested on Gu Zishi's shoulder. He said firmly, Zishi, when we reach the Heaven Realm, we'll get married. Get married. These two words made Gu Zishi grab Pei Sheng's clothes tightly in surprise. Her eyes instantly turned red as she nodded her head vigorously. The two of them hugged each other tightly. On the other side, Huang Fuzhentian took a deep look at the two of them hugging each other, and looked at Su Qingbing, although he didn't show it on his face. But in his heart, he was shocked when he heard this news. In his heart, he was even more satisfied with his grandson, and the woman that he had taken a liking to. In his heart, a decision was slowly forming. His expression was solemn as he looked at Su Qingbing and said, regardless of the reason why Leader Scarlet had intervened, it is a fact that Leader Scarlet has saved that boy. I will definitely remember this kindness. As for other matters, don't worry, Leader Scarlet. Since I've personally brought that boy and Lady Gu to the Heaven Realm, I will definitely protect them. Any intelligent person would be able to tell. Su Qingbing had purposely revealed the reason why Gu Zishi was the vice leader of Bloody, To put it bluntly, he just wanted to show Gu Zishi how powerful she was. At the same time, it would change Gu Zishi's position in the Huangfu family's heart. It was also a warning to Old Master Huangfu. Gu Zishi was not someone without a backer. If Gu Zishi was injured in the Heaven Realm, Bloody Mercenary Group would be the first to stand behind Gu Zishi and take revenge for her with all their might. The group of people said a few more words. Old Master Huangfu dragged Huangfu Fengyan away. The bloody mercenaries followed behind Elder Huangfu with the assassins in tow. After a while, the courtyard quietened down again. Yiqing Luo took a look at the two who were still hugging each other tightly and sighed. What a pair of silly lovers. Muddle-headedly registered for the QQ reading character ranking. The babies helped to make a heart sign and gave a like. They didn't wish to rush into the top 40. They only wished to be in the top 100 and not let the crippled 7 emperors appear too desolate. Chapter 3907. She simply shifted her gaze away and looked at Su Qingbing, who had yet to leave. Su Qingbing still maintained a lazy posture. That dignified look on her elegant face had been retracted by quite a bit. She just raised her head and looked at that figure on the wall. Between her beautiful eyes, there was some brilliance flowing. But when Yiqing Luo took a careful look, it was a stretch of deep, without a single bit of emotion. She followed Su Qingbing's gaze. On the wall, the red-robed man who was standing against the wind met her eyes expressionlessly. The person Su Qingbing was looking at was Zhu Wu Xian. She raised her brows, feeling that she seemed to have discovered something incredible. Since he's safe, I'll make a move first. I'll leave these two fools in your care. Su Qingbing seemed to have sensed Yiqing Luo's gaze, and immediately retracted her gaze, as she pretended not to mind and waved her hand. Yiqing Luo's eyes curved into a crescent shape as her figure moved and appeared next to Su Qingbing. She raised her hand and hooked onto Su Qingbing's shoulder. The young lady gave a teasing smile as she teased. Why? Are you in a hurry to leave? Afraid that I'll see through some secret that I shouldn't see? Su Qingbing's beautiful eyes flashed as she subconsciously looked at Zhu Wu Xian. After this action was done, Su Qingbing then realized that she had been hooked. Yiqing Luo's smile deepened. Her curved brows and narrow long eyes outlined an arc, like a blooming datura flower, so alluring that it made one suffocated. Tisk! Su Qingbing's look made Yiqing Luo even more interested. She was really curious. What had happened between Su Qingbing and Zhu Wu Xian? She could tell. Su Qingbing's impression of Zhu Wu Xian was very deep. I have to return to Blood Color headquarters first. Su Qingbing's hair stood on end from Yiqing Luo's meaningful smile. She hurriedly found an excuse. She turned around and hurriedly leapt up the wall. On top of the wall, Su Qingbing intentionally halted her footsteps. Her vision clashed with Zhu Wu Xian. In just a few breaths' time, she raised her breath again, and her figure flashed as she blended into the night. The courtyard, which had turned into ruins, fell into a strange silence. That pair of foolish lovers were still hugging each other, unwilling to part. A fool is a fool. Hugging each other and feeling each other's warmth. This was their happiness. But Yiqing Luo shot a glance at the both of them as her lips suddenly curled into a crafty arc. Then he lifted his leg and kicked Pei Sheng's butt. Pei Sheng's entire body was kicked forward by the force. Gu Zishi almost lost her footing. Following that, several medicine bottles were stuffed into their arms. Get out of the house and make love. Yiqing Luo turned their bodies around and pushed them towards the room which wasn't affected by the battle earlier. Pei Sheng was forcefully pushed to the door as he struggled to turn his head around to take a look at Yiqing Luo. But because of Yiqing Luo's strength, he was unable to resist at all. Ah Luo, don't tell me you don't like our relationship because His Majesty is not here and you can't stand it? Yiqing Luo's expression instantly sunk. The hand that grabbed Pei Sheng's shoulder suddenly tightened. Ah! Pei Sheng screamed miserably as his shoulder struggled to pull away from Yiqing Luo's palm. It was so painful that he almost cried. Yiqing Luo gave a fake smile. If you still want to hug a beauty to sleep tonight, you'd better shut your mouth and roll into the room. Pei Sheng. This smile is so scary. He swiftly hugged Gu Zishi tightly as he escaped into the room. Chapter 3908. In the courtyard, there was only Yi Qing Luo left. She then stretched her body lazily. As she yawned, she looked towards the red figure standing on the wall. The show has ended, aren't you leaving? Zhu Wu Xian's vision, from the start, was fixed on her. When he saw the young lady's languid look, her long and narrow eyes were filled with a lazy misty look towards him. His eyes glowed with a bright light. Even his pitch-black pupils involuntarily contracted. His hands, which were hanging by his side, clenched into fists. Especially when that young lady yawned, with a soft and coquettish voice rang. His body, almost instantly, turned stiff and taut. For a long time the man didn't reply. Yi Qing Luo lowered her hands as she raised her brows at him, meeting with Zhu Wu Xian's scorching gaze. Her eyelashes fluttered slightly as she tilted her head, her eyes revealing a smile which didn't look like a smile. Have you seen enough? This sentence made Zhu Wu Xian have a response. His thin lips moved slightly as his voice was very cold. Not enough. If you're still conscious, then please go ahead. Take care, I won't send you off. Yi Qing Luo intentionally ignored his provocative words as she impatiently waved her hand. Zhu Wu Xian instead flew down from the wall. He got close to Yi Qing Luo. The red-robed man and red-robed young lady's figures intertwined. Yi Qing Luo didn't evade. Instead she faced the man's approaching face, raising her head as her lips curled into a bright smile. This smile, like a blooming poppy flower, giving off a suffocating charm, magnified under his eyes. Zhu Wu Xian's heart skipped a beat. Immediately after, his body abruptly pulled away from Yi Qing Luo. His eyes were flickering with erratic emotions. Yi Qing Luo revealed an understanding smile. She was very clear. The more she expressed that she didn't want to interact with him, Zhu Wu Xian would be insatiable, wanting to leave a place in her heart. On the contrary, she cooperated with Zhu Wu Xian's words. Zhu Wu Xian would be even more shy than her. Looking at Yi Qing Luo's teasing smile, Zhu Wu Xian's pupils contracted. He suddenly stretched out his hand and clasped Yi Qing Luo's wrist as his eyes stared straight at her. Do you think that I don't dare to do anything to you? Yes. Yi Qing Luo replied straightforwardly. If you dare, when I just arrived at the Earth realm, you painstakingly imprisoned me for half a month, and erased all my memories, you would have done it. The hand that was clasping her wrist suddenly tightened. Even Zhu Wuxin stiffened for a moment. Even now you still blame me. Zhu Wuxin stared at her. It was not a question but a statement. It would be a lie to say that I don't blame him. Yi Qing Luo didn't try to hide it. No matter which woman it is, if she was kidnapped by another man and imprisoned by his side for as long as half a month, would she not blame that man? Zhu Wuxin's eyes darkened, and he clenched his fists. His slender fingers pressed onto Yi Qing Luo's wrist, causing some pain. Zhu Wu Xian didn't bother about Yi Qing Luo's slightly creased brows because of the pain, but instead pressed down even tighter. Even the words that came out of his mouth were mixed with the meaning of gnashing his teeth. I shouldn't have been soft on you in the first place. Not soft. His meaning was that he should have taken the opportunity to eat her up in the first place? Yi Qing Luo laughed lightly, but there wasn't any hint of a smile in her eyes. If you really did that, then between us, there would no longer be any feelings. The next time we meet, we will be enemies. Enemies too. At least, you will not belong to that man. Zhu Wuxin's eyes seemed to be surging with waves. Chapter 3909. Yi Qing Luo frowned. Looking at the madness in Zhu Wuxin's eyes, her heart skipped a beat. He subconsciously wanted to break free from Zhu Wuxin's grip. However, Zhu Wuxin tightened his grip. He reached out with his long arms. He then pressed Yi Qing Luo heavily into his arms. The plum fragrance which assaulted her nostrils made Yi Qing Luo's slender brows crease tightly in discomfort. She struggled. Zhu Wuxin. Woman, you are really heartless. Zhu Wuxin was almost gnashing his teeth next to her ear. This time, I really do not want to go easy on you. As soon as he finished speaking, he exerted strength in his arm. The man's warm breath rushed over from a close distance. There was also a hint of fragrance mixed with it that made her feel alarmed. Almost at the instant the man lowered his head. Yiqing Luo's eyes flashed coldly. His dark force burst forth. He flipped his palm, intending to attack Zhu Wuxin and avoid his approach. It was at this moment. A heavy groan sounded beside his ear. The hand on his waist suddenly loosened. What replaced it was another strong and powerful force. The familiar fragrance of sandalwood wafted into his nose. Yiqing Luo turned her head happily. Sure enough, she saw her man appear behind her. Dmo Xian had one arm around her waist. His expression was noble and elegant as his gaze was filled with a chilly glint as he stared intently at Zhu Wuxian. I'm late. The man's deep and mellow voice instantly soothed Yiqing Luo's restless heart. His large and thick palms pulled the young girl's delicate body into his embrace. It was different, thick and sturdy. A different kind of warmth. It was a different taste. It was a completely different feeling from Zhu Wuxin. Dmo Xian was the feeling she wanted to have the most. Yiqing Luo's eyelashes trembled slightly. Suddenly, she raised her lips and tightly wrapped her arms around the man's firm waist. She buried her face in his chest. Struck by the palm, Zhu Wuxin had to retreat several steps before he could stabilize himself. The flame-like red swayed. After Yiqing Luo absorbed the warmth, she popped her head out to take a look at Zhu Wuxian. He felt that the current Zhu Wuxin had a gloomy feeling, as if the flames all over his body were about to be extinguished. As if I had lost all my lifelight. He seemed to have sensed her gaze. Zhu Wuxin clutched his chest and looked at her with a pale face. His eyes met hers. A smile appeared on his grave and stern face. His lips curled up slightly. There was a hint of bitterness in his voice. Yiqing Luo couldn't help but creased her slender brows once again. He didn't have time to think about it. A large palm suddenly covered her eyes. In front of him, there was only warmth, and he couldn't see anything. Don't look at him. The man's domineering voice rang in her ears, and there was a hint of jealousy in his tone. Then he raised his head and looked at Zhu Wuxian. His entire body exuded a chill. Zhu Wuxian, I haven't settled the score with you for what happened last time. You dare to play the same trick again? The moment he opened his mouth, he was not angry, but he exuded an imposing aura. Zhu Wuxin sneered. What? I merely touched her. Yet you're already so furious. Could it be that you think she's dirty? As soon as he said that, the surrounding temperature had also dropped to the extreme. Dmo Xian's eyes gleamed coldly. The murderous aura was also sweeping wildly. But Zhu Wuxian laughed crazily. That grave and stern face looked extremely insane. Both their profound rays intertwined, just as it was about to explode. Suddenly, a slender fair hand gently placed on the back of the hand which covered her eyes. Slowly it pulled that hand down. The young lady's eyes regained its clarity. Chapter 39:10. The young lady's alluring face was filled with calmness. The corners of his lips curled into a mocking sneer. Even the gaze which she shot towards Zhu Wuxian was filled with viciousness. This gaze made Zhu Wuxian's heart felt as though it was pierced by something as it trembled fiercely, as though something was gradually disappearing between him and Yiqing Luo. The red-robed man's eyes were filled with madness. At this moment, there was finally a slight fluctuation. The wind brought along the young lady's ridiculing laughter. Zhu Wuxian, do you think that after knowing that you imprisoned me for nearly half a month, I will still be defenseless against you? Zhu Wuxian, do you think that after doing this, I will belong to you again? Zhu Wuxian. The dirty person is you. The young lady spoke each word extremely clearly. Her voice was very sweet, but in Zhu Wuxian's ears, it was like a sharp blade, fiercely slicing his eardrums. That sharp blade went down from his ears to his heart, and then slowly sliced his heart bit by bit. Unbearable pain. Zhu Wuxian shut his eyes tightly. From the moment you made a move against me earlier, I was completely certain. Earlier you stopped me several times, not allowing me to rush over to save Pei Sheng, obviously. On purpose. At that moment, Yiqing Luo was already suspicious towards Zhu Wuxian's appearance. But because it was Zhu Wuxian, she didn't investigate further. Because she knew that Zhu Wuxian's obsession towards her would absolutely not harm her. So she chose to believe in Zhu Wu Xian. Until just now. When she smelled that fragrance from the man, Yi Qingluo then realized that everything was because she was too naive. From the start of Zhu Wu Xian's appearance till now, all had a motive. Yi Qingluo. Zhu Wu Xian heard Yi Qingluo's ridiculing words. And when she looked at him, that disappointment and ridicule, his heart felt as though it was being sliced into pieces. He subconsciously wanted to explain, Yi Qingluo is not. Are you trying to say that it's not what I think? Yi Qingluo interrupted his words, as her smile became even more contemptuous. Even between his brows, there was a mocking smile that was not a smile. Zhu Wu Xian. Suddenly, she called his name in a serious tone. The young lady withdrew herself from Dmo Xian's embrace, as she lifted her light footsteps and walked towards him. The girl's expression was cold, and her picturesque eyebrows were filled with killing intent. Zhu Wu Xian felt an inexplicable sense of nervousness. He was so nervous that he could only stare at the girl's approaching face and clench his fists tightly, waiting for her to continue. You want to explain, right? All right, I'll give you a chance. She stood 3 steps away from Zhu Wu Xian. Then, she raised her eyes and stared straight into his eyes. Zhu Wu Xian's heart skipped a beat again. Do you dare look me in the eye and tell me that your appearance today is not a coincidence, but an accident? Zhu Wu Xian's eyes darkened. Even his cold face was covered with a layer of frost. This reaction, even if he didn't answer, Yi Qingluo had already gotten her answer. She sneered and looked at Zhu Wu Xian. She couldn't help but laugh. Zhu Wu Xian, if you really want to lie to me, you should lie to the end. I want to lie to you. Zhu Wu Xian's expression was gloomy and cold as his eyes stared deadly at Yi Qingluo, as a whirlpool appeared in between his brows. But I know that the minute I really lie to you, you will really become a stranger to me. Amen, it's not fake. Yi Qingluo smiled. Her smile was gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. Chapter 39:11. It wasn't fake. Which meant, no matter what his answer was, like strangers, these 4 words couldn't be fake. Zhu Wu Xian's heartstrings quivered. He thought, after Yi Qingluo found out that he had imprisoned her for half a month, she wasn't too angry and still treated him the same as before. He thought, Yi Qingluo wouldn't blame him. But he had never expected Yi Qingluo to be so resolute. So resolute that when he intended to do it for the second time, she would not hesitate to cut off all relations with him. His heart, as compared to the first time he met her, was even more painful from her cold attitude, and when she totally didn't recognize him, it was so painful that he was about to die. He thought. He was already numb, and no matter how painful it was, he could maintain his calmness, to stand calmly in front of Yi Qingluo and continue his stubbornness. But the feeling now proved that his thought was really just a thought. His heart would hurt. When he met with the young lady's icy cold gaze, his heart would surge with waves. Not to mention standing in front of her. Now he only had the urge to escape from her accusing gaze. Zhu Wu Xian, you're still working with the secluded palace, right? You want to help the secluded palace to deal with the people around me, right? Even when Yi Qingluo saw his cold face, that complicated and painful expression, she didn't let him off. She was still overbearing. The imposing manner became more and more pressing. The expression on Zhu Wu Xian's face became even more conflicted. He moved his thin lips and his voice sounded a little hoarse. No. It's not like that. He wanted to explain, but when the words were about to come out of his mouth, he licked his dry lips and stopped the words from leaving his mouth. Immediately after, his thin lips pursed, not saying a word. Yi Qingluo waited for a moment, and on seeing him maintaining his silence, her lips curled into a sneer of ridicule. Explain. I'm not being unreasonable. If you don't want to listen to your explanation, I'll give you a chance to explain. Zhu Wu Xian continued to stare at her without blinking, not saying a word. Yi Qingluo's gaze towards him became even colder. Since you're not going to explain, then I'll speak according to my understanding. Her brows rose as her tone was filled with ridicule. Do you think that after breaking my wings, I can only choose to rely on you? Ha Zhu Wu Xian, do you think I'm such a person? No. Light flickered in Zhu Wu Xian's eyes, and he wanted to answer. However, he still held back and did not say it out loud. If Yi Qing Luo was that kind of person, he would absolutely not take another look at her. But it was precisely because he knew this. He wanted to see even more. After Yi Qing Luo lost everything, what would they become? At that time, would his obsession still be as deep as it was now? Zhu Wuxin, just give up. Even if you want to break my wings, even if you want to separate me and Xian, this lifetime, the next lifetime, the next lifetime, no matter how long it takes, I, Yi Qing Luo, will never choose you. Yi Qing Luo's voice was cold and ruthless. The sonorous voice was like a huge hammer that landed heavily on Zhu Wuxin's heart. Zhu Wu Xian's body shook violently. He flicked his sleeves. A cool breeze swept past. Several sharp sounds of wind could be heard in the air. The red figure had already disappeared before his eyes. In her resolute words, Zhu Wuxin fled in panic. Yi Qing Luo was expressionless, as though she had no emotions towards his escape. Only after she was sure that Zhu Wu Xian's presence had completely disappeared. Chapter 39:12. The young lady's face was pale, and there was no longer that overbearing aura from earlier on. Her petite body was caught by someone. Tightly, she was brought into a warm and spacious embrace. Leluo. Dmo Xian's voice was filled with anxiety and worry. Yi Qing Luo wanted to open her eyes and smile at him to reassure him. But the minute she opened her eyes, it was a patch of blood color before her eyes which immediately turned into a patch of pitch black. She was unable to open her eyes. The dizziness in her head made her lose the ability to think. Finally, under Dmo Xian's gentle and affectionate call of Lil Luo, she completely lost all consciousness. Lil Luo, sensing the change in Yi Qing Luo's breathing, Dmo Xian's voice suddenly rose as his shimmering eyes stared intently at the person in his arms. After checking the young lady's pulse, Dmo Xian's expression turned darker. His fingers clenched tightly as he gritted his teeth and spat out 3 words. Zhu Wu Xian. Damn that Zhu Wu Xian. No matter if Lil Luo would forgive Zhu Wu Xian, he would absolutely not forgive her. Dmo Xian tightened his arms as he raised his voice and called out in a low voice, Xian Beiyuan. 2 figures, one tall and one short, appeared in the night sky. Guard this place, don't let other blind things come near. Dmo Xian instructed and carried Yi Qing Luo as he flew away. Tang Beiyuan stared blankly at the direction where Dmo Xian left, watching his figure disappear completely. She then regained her senses as she slowly stood up. The man on the side was tall and imposing, with a handsome face, but his brows were rigid and solemn. The man's vision had been on Tang Beiyuan. Seeing that she stood up and was still in a daze, he comforted her. Madam will be fine. Hearing the man's voice, Tang Beiyuan's eyelashes fluttered. When she raised her head, her lips curled into a smile. Amen, I know. With the overlord around, Madam will definitely be fine. She had seen with her own eyes how much her master cared about Yi Qing Luo. Her daze wasn't because she was worried about Yi Qing Luo, but very envious. Envious of the relationship between the overlord and Madam. No matter what time it was, it would always make one laugh unknowingly. As for her, even though her fiancé was by her side, he could even touch it with his hand. However, she still felt as if they were thousands of miles apart and out of reach. Tang Beiyuan lowered her eyes, and the smile on her face disappeared. Yuan. The man sensed that Tang Beiyuan was upset. He raised his hand and placed it on her shoulder in confusion. What's wrong? Tang Beiyuan raised her head and stared blankly at Lang Lixian, who was a head taller than her. Soon a smile appeared on his face. I'm fine. Lang Lixian caressed her face and didn't ask any more questions. The man wiped his face with his slightly cold hand. Tang Beiyuan instinctively reached out and grabbed his hand. Lang Lixian was startled and looked at her doubtfully. Tang Beiyuan gritted her teeth, mustered up her courage, and placed the man's hand on her waist. Then she turned around and hooked her arms around his neck. It's been a long time since we've been this close. To be more precise, it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Every time they met, it was just a hurried glance. After that, they would leave in a hurry. Not to mention a hug to feel each other's warmth. There wasn't even a chance to greet each other. Chapter 39:13. Lang Lixian had just finished his words when he used his actions to express his attitude. He pulled Tang Beiyuan's hand away and widened the distance between the both of them. Immediately after, he leapt up the wall in the dark, and his entire figure was hidden in the darkness. Tang Beiyuan stood in a daze on the spot. The hands which were pulled away by the man were still hanging stiffly in the air. After some time, he slowly retracted his hands. There seemed to be a man's touch on her wrists. There seemed to be a man's scent in her nose. Tang Beiyuan's lips suddenly twitched as she gave a soft laugh. She turned her head and walked towards the other side of the wall, hiding in the dark with the man on the left and right, and completely hiding the sparkling eyes which flashed past her eyes. Qiao residence. Dmo Xian carried Yiqing Luo back to the room. His fiery appearance was accompanied by a powerful pressure. It made those who had just returned to the Qiao residence ran out of the room in shock. It was so late at night, this was very scary, all right. They thought that the secluded palace had made a comeback. But after seeing the unconscious Yiqing Luo, everyone couldn't stand still as they flocked over. Kitty Li was carried out from Zomo's arms and she was still rubbing her eyes sleepily, but when she saw Yiqing Luo being placed on the bed, her eyes suddenly opened wide. She scurried out of Zomo's arms and pounced towards the bed. Sister. What happened to sister? What happened to her? Kitty Li held Yiqing Luo's hand, but realized that her hand was ice cold. Old Lai didn't feel well. Earlier at the Treasures Exchange Hall, wasn't she still fine? How long has it been? In his impression, Yiqing Luo and the Overlord were on the same level of abnormality. No one could hurt her. So on the way back to the Qiao residence, they didn't specially wait for Yiqing Luo. No one had expected. It was such a coincidence. Yiqing Luo was coincidentally injured. Gue Wu stood in the crowd as he frowned slightly. Apparently, he was puzzled over why Yiqing Luo was injured and was carried back by Dmo Xian. She's fine. Among the many concerned voices, Dmo Xian's slightly hoarse voice rang. He also successfully suppressed the voices of those who were talking at once. Dmo Xian sat on the bedside. Kitty Li looked at Dmo Xian, and then at Yiqing Luo. Under Zomo's tugging, he reluctantly let go of Yiqing Luo's hand, and gave up his position to Dmo Xian. Dmo Xian held Yiqing Luo's hand, using his broad palm to warm Yiqing Luo's hand as he continued to speak calmly. I'm here, everyone, don't worry. Everyone turned pale and wanted to ask more questions. But looking at Dmo Xian's expression, however, none of them dared to ask. In the end, Gue Wu took the lead and walked out of the room. Only then did the others leave the room one after another, looking back every few steps. After closing the door, Kitty Li pursed her lips. She grabbed Zomo's hand with displeasure and worry, pinching it from time to time. What's wrong with my sister? Dizun and brother-in-law didn't say anything. How can I be at ease? The Overlord is more worried about her than any of us. Zomo caressed Kitty Li's head. Since the Overlord says it's fine, then Xiaoqing Luo will be fine. Qing Luoshi. Suddenly, a soft but emotionless voice was heard from the crowd. Everyone's gazes turned towards the direction of the voice. Chapter 39:14. Drugged unconscious? What kind of joke was that? Yiqing Luo, that kind of pervert. She was a top-tier alchemist. How could she be drugged unconscious? It's the truth. Mo Yuing blinked her empty eyes and repeated seriously. You can ask her when she wakes up. Looking at the little lowly's serious look, everyone was still in disbelief. After all, drugging had always been Yiqing Luo's specialty. I believe you. Suddenly, a deep voice was heard. Xiao Yinyan had appeared at the corner of the long corridor, and was slowly walking towards their direction. The moment Xiao Yinyan appeared, everyone stopped their discussion. The man walked slowly to Mo Yuing. His gaze was deep like the sea and his silver hair hung down his cheeks, adding a mysterious and noble feeling to the man. Mo Yuing raised her head and blinked as she looked at the approaching figure. The aura from the man made her heart, or rather her soul, had a restless feeling. It was very uncomfortable, and she didn't like this feeling. She wanted to avoid it. But Xiao Yinyan seemed to see through her thoughts as he stretched out his hand and blocked in front of her. The man's gaze was burning, as if he could see through Mo Yuying's soul. You have always been sensitive to the people you care about, and can easily see the condition of others. This point, you still haven't changed. Mo Yuying's brows were tightly knitted together as she looked at him with her empty eyes. However, his pupils were not focused at all, and there was not the slightest bit of spirit in them. When these eyes looked over, for a moment, it made one feel that this pair of eyes were already blind. Anyone who was stared at by such empty eyes for a long time would have a creepy feeling. However, Xiao Yinyan met her gaze and gently curved his thin lips. He smiled and said, "Even your expression of disgust hasn't changed." Mo Yuying's stiff expression loosened for a moment. When the others heard this sweet, cloying words, all of them rubbed their arms. How did Xiao Yinyan see the bored expression on Mo Yuying's face? That was obviously expressionless, okay? That was what everyone thought in their hearts. But as the person involved, Mo Yuying was shocked. She had always been unable to express her emotions. Her face was stiff. His eyes were lifeless. Even his voice was completely emotionless. In addition, she couldn't even express ordinary emotions. Even a sensitive lady like Yi Qingluo would not be able to detect her emotions. This man in front of him. Yet he could see through her heart so easily? Could it be that she really knew him before? After Lin Mingya invited him out of the room, the chatter outside the door continued. Mo Xian looked at the unconscious young girl. His fingertips covered the young girl's slightly furrowed brows and gently smoothed her brows. Then, with a flick of his sleeve, an invisible wave spread out in the room, forming an oval transparent barrier that enveloped the entire room. It also successfully blocked out the noisy discussion outside the door. He held the girl's cold hand tightly, one hand on his cheek, and the other on his mouth to warm it. His peerless face was filled with a peaceful expression of pampering. There was not the slightest hint of anxiety or unease. He wasn't worried that this medicine would cause any harm or influence to Yi Qingluo, because this was the medicine which Zhu Wu Xian had given to Yi Qingluo. Even if Zhu Wu Xian was working together with the secluded palace, he would absolutely not hurt Yi Qingluo. Chapter 39:15. But he was unable to ascertain when Yi Qingluo would wake up. Mo Xian's eyes were fixated on the young lady's peaceful sleeping face without blinking. Her eyes were calm, pure and beautiful, but that pair of icy cold hands couldn't be warmed up no matter what. His broad palm closed over one of her small hands. The other hand stretched out his slender fingers, gently caressing the young lady's icy cold but peaceful facial features. After gazing at it for some time, he sighed softly. Straightening himself, he took off his coat. Lifting up a corner of the blanket, he burrowed into it. Even though she was covered in the blanket, the young lady's body was still icy cold. Mo Xian laid on one side. His arm scooped the young lady into his arms. Using his own warmth, he enveloped the young lady completely. If it wasn't for the fact that the young lady's breathing was smooth and her pulse was steady, this icy cold touch, it was indeed very scary. The person in his arms seemed to have felt the source of warmth. Her little body shrunk into the man's arms. Her peaceful little face revealed a blissful and satisfied smile. Mo Xian placed his chin on her head, feeling the person in his arms, infected with his warmth, his scent. The last time in the Nirvana realm's passageway to the upper realm, he was careless and allowed Zhu Wu Xian to snatch Lil Luo away. That was close to half a month's time. Lil Luo was imprisoned in such a state by Zhu Wu Xian. This time, how long would Lil Luo sleep for? Yi Qingluo's head was groggy, as though she was being pressed down heavily by something. She was so exhausted that she couldn't even move a muscle. She creased her brows in pain. She wanted to raise her hand to rub her temples, but her arms were stiff and so heavy that she couldn't lift them at all. She struggled to open her heavy eyes, trying to see clearly what was going on with her. But when she opened her eyes, the surroundings were all white and there was nothing at all. Deathly silence. Where was this? Why was she here? She remembered. She sensed that something was wrong with Zhu Wu Xian and wanted to leave. But Zhu Wu Xian stretched out his hand and pulled her. There was a strange smell coming from Zhu Wu Xian's body. That smell. It was a knockout drug that could make a person unconscious. However, even if she reacted, she would not be able to. However, he still couldn't help but smell that scent. In the end, she seemed to have held on till Zhu Wu Xian left, and she fell into Dmo Xian's arms. Yes, Xian. Wasn't she in Xian's arms? That was absolute safety. Why did she suddenly appear here? And it's so uncomfortable? Yi Qingluo's mind was filled with doubts, but was unable to get an answer. Just then, the vast expanse of whiteness in front of him suddenly dispersed. Then a 10,000 feet tall cliff appeared in front of him. She didn't have time to react to what was going on. Suddenly, his body, which was so heavy that he couldn't move at all, fell down the cliff at an extremely fast speed. It was extremely fast. Yi Qingluo could feel the sharp wind, like a knife, cutting her skin. The wind whistled past her ears, irritating her eardrums. She wanted to resist. However, his stiff body was unable to move. He took a deep breath to alleviate the pressure of falling. There was a sharp pain in her heart, causing her to be unable to concentrate. His body continued to fall, and continued to fall. It was like a bottomless abyss. No matter what, he couldn't touch the end point. Yi Qingluo tried her best to concentrate, as her vision suddenly fixed on a certain spot. Not too far away from her, an illusory figure was faintly discernible, even though her falling speed was extremely fast. But that figure was still firmly fixed in her pupils. QQ Readings Character Ranking. May I trouble my babies to help me make a heart sign and label them? Not hoping to charge into the top 40, but to be able to maintain within the top 100. Chapter 39:16. Who was that? Yi Qingluo widened her eyes, trying to see the true face of that figure. However, the speed at which she was falling caused her eyes to be half open and blurry. Plus that figure seemed to be shrouded in a thin layer of white mist, illusory, making that figure look like an immortal, extremely mysterious. Yi Qingluo saw it even more unreal. Just as she was feeling bewildered, that figure suddenly moved, her wrist lifted lightly, the gauze slid down, revealing her fair wrist. Her slender fingers were as smooth as jade, and there was even a thin layer of pale velvet light lingering around them. Every move, it seemed to draw out a white ray, sweeping past Yi Qingluo's eyes. In her ear, she could faintly hear an inaudible gentle voice. "Child, close your eyes." That voice, gentle like the wind, seeped into her heart from her eardrums. Not knowing why, Yi Qingluo's heart actually had a kind of twitching feeling. It was as if he had been tightly gripped by an ice-cold palm, made her breathing become tight, almost like a physical instinct. She listened to that voice, closed her eyes. Which was the moment she closed her eyes. Yi Qingluo seemed to see that white ray, as fast as lightning, heading straight for her face. She couldn't react in time. Her brain suddenly flooded with a large piece of complex and obscure totem. Large piece after large piece, quickly eroding her brain. Her brain immediately seemed to be squeezed by these totem, about to explode. She wanted to hug her headache and groan. But her whole body seemed to be imprisoned by a strong force, unable to move. Not knowing if it was an illusion. The moment she closed her eyes, Lin Sanjiu smiled. Her body seemed to have stopped falling, suspended in mid-air. Ugh! A painful groan came from her nose. The totem continued to surge, constantly converging towards her heart. Suddenly, Yi Qingluo felt a scorching heat in her heart. No. More accurately, it was the profound jade heart. A burst of scorching feeling hit her heart. Following that, there was a strange aura. surging around the profound jade heart. That aura was extremely unfamiliar. It didn't seem like the profound energy she was familiar with. What was going on? What on earth was this aura? What surprised Yiqing Luo the most was her body. After coming into contact with this unfamiliar aura, there was no resistance at all. Instead, it was like an open mouth greedily absorbing this strange and unfamiliar aura. This was the first time she had encountered such a strange situation. Yiqing Luo was startled and wanted to control her profound heart jade to prevent that unfamiliar qi from entering her body. However, there was resistance. The profound jade heart in his chest began to let out a sharp pain in protest. Her face instantly turned pale from the pain. She endured the pain with great difficulty. He quickly released his dark force to probe the strange aura in his body. However, the instant her profound energy intertwined with the unfamiliar aura, his profound energy actually took the initiative to entangle that aura. Yiqing Luo. What the hell was going on? She wanted to get in touch with Old Man Song and ask him what was going on. But he didn't have time to connect his mental power with the Azure Dew bracelet. The profound heart jade suddenly sank again. The tearing pain once again messed up Yiqing Luo's thoughts. Relax, don't resist. Follow your body's instincts, accept it. That gentle voice once again sounded beside her ear. Like a spring breeze, it soothed the sharp pain in her heart. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.